migrant processing centers, but criticized the administration for moving forward with new restrictions on asylum. Republicans and immigration hardliners criticized the plan too, arguing it will encourage more illegal immigration. Barring a last-minute surprise, the pandemic restrictions known as Title 42 are set to lift on May 11th. Joel Rose, NPR News, Washington.
There are reports of continuing heavy fighting in Sudan today, especially in the capital, Khartoum. There's also fighting in an adjacent city. The military junta in charge of Sudan's army and its rival, the powerful paramilitary forces, say that they have agreed to a new 3-day ceasefire, but it's fragile at best. The World Health Organization's Dr. Richard Brennan says Sudanese civilians have been plunged into a catastrophe.
The Ministry of Health now estimates that around 61% of health facilities in Khartoum alone are non-functional. Because of the high levels of violence, doctors and nurses cannot reach health facilities on a consistent basis, and it's the same for patients. And of course, it's been extremely difficult to resupply the hospitals and clinics.
Hundreds of people have been killed in about 2 weeks of fighting in Sudan. You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The state's Board of Education proposing more flexible regulations in certain high-needs areas. That's amid an ongoing teacher shortage. New England Public Media's Jill Kaufman has more.
In Massachusetts, if you're already a teacher with a professional license, the state requires a 150-hour internship to teach students with disabilities or English as a second language. Proposed changes would allow classroom teachers to obtain a provisional license for those subjects before the internship. At this month's Board of Education meeting, State Education Commissioner Jeff Riley said the amendments would let more educators teach in those fields where school districts are reporting major staffing challenges.
This would allow traditional teachers an easier pathway to get a license in special education or ESL, or would create some relief.
The board voted unanimously in favor of the changes. A final vote is expected in June. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Jill Kaufman.
The Nantucket Daffodil Festival is this weekend. Event starts today and runs through Sunday. The festivities include flower shows, picnics, and a children's bike parade. Let's hope the rain doesn't put a damper on the Daffodil Festival. In sports, Red Sox are back at Fenway tonight. They host the Cleveland Guardians, and the Bruins try to follow in the footsteps of the Celtics tonight and try to wrap up their series with the Panthers in 6 games. The Bees lead the series 3-2. Mostly sunny, low 60s today, 58 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments' team of specialists offer guidance on investing, retirement income, and Social Security. FisherInvestments.com. Investments in securities involve the risk of loss.
Houston Brady, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. Hello, Jim.
Hello there, Marjorie. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. So, after bombshell reporting by ProPublica, which we discussed with you, on undisclosed trips and financial favors doled out to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, something finally may happen. Then earlier this week, another story broke revealing the head of a major law firm, whose lawyers regularly appear before the Supreme Court, bought 40 acres of property from another Supreme Court Justice, Neil Gorsuch, just days after he was confirmed. That was not disclosed, and sadly doesn't seem to be required to be. You know, for years, our next guest has been sounding the alarm about the influence of so-called dark money in politics, about ethical lapses by Supreme Court justices. But don't take our word for it. Listen to what Meet the Press's Chuck Todd had to say to us yesterday about our next guest.
He knows every inch of this stuff. Like,
yeah, he does.
Very prepared. Many senators are unprepared. They don't study. There's most of the senators are the jocks of school. Okay, they let other people do the studying for them, and they just quickly read the notes.
Yeah.
Sheldon Whitehouse is not. Maybe he was a jock. I'm not saying he might not have been athletic. I'm not trying to say that, but he does his homework.
We're now going to find out from that guy who may be a jock, we don't know, or may have been a jock, what he and his Senate colleagues can and may do To address this disease, we're now joined on Zoom by Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator, it's a pleasure to have you as always.
Thank you for having me back. It's always great to be on with you.
Terrific.
Well, Senator Whitehouse, I don't know if you heard Chuck Todd, the host of Meet the Press, debating whether you were a jock or a nerd in high school. I understood you were the heartthrob of the football team. Was I mistaken about that?
No, I was pretty lame as an athlete. I was very little until quite late. So
okay.
I used to just get thrown around when I did sports.
Okay. So that enabled anyway for you to delve into all the things that are upsetting
really
at least
right.
some of us about the Supreme Court. Jim just mentioned Clarence Thomas with the luxury yachts and the private jets. Gorsuch not talking about who gave him money in these real estate transactions. I've learned in anticipation of speaking to you today about a lot of the justices, those appointed by Republicans and Democrats, taking paid-for trips to different countries, paid for places that might have worked before the Supreme Court or cases before the Supreme Court. So we now have Justice Roberts and the other justices signing on this document that basically says there's no problem here, which rather surprised me. So is there a problem here or not?
Yeah, that was a ridiculous letter, and the memo about ethics that they all signed was equally ridiculous. If they were litigants, and the question before the court was the adequacy of Supreme Court ethics, and that was their filing, they'd get blown out of court. They'd be laughed at by the other party in the jury. It's really stunning that people who are at the very height of the legal profession would put forward such a preposterous document. The problem is a simple one. They won't apply any of the process for ethics enforcement to themselves. And they say not one word about process in there. The fundamental problem is that each is allowed to be judge of his own case. And the rule that you don't allow people to judge their own case is so old, it's in Latin. Nemo judex in sua causa.
Of course
Just
it is.
Don't do it.
Senator Whitehouse, before we get back to what's wrong and what you and your colleagues can and hopefully will do to rein all this behavior in, Marjorie mentioned that all 9 justices signed this communique to your Judiciary Committee from the Chief Justice. We were talking to former federal Judge Nancy Gertner yesterday, and Marjorie kept saying, I don't quite understand why the Sotomayors, well, we can, the obvious ones, why did they sign on to something as absurd as this?
I don't know. There's this weird sort of omerta collegiality thing at the Supreme Court that I think at the moment is really disserving the court. But like I said, it's a terrible argument in the face of the question in front of the court. And the idea that lawyers of that distinction signed on to it is really unpleasant.
Senator, I'm sorry, go ahead. My apologies.
No, I was just going to say that in Poor Richard's Almanac, Ben Franklin said the best way to show when one stick is crooked is to lie a straight stick next to it. And the straight stick is the way every single circuit court of appeals behaves.
Yeah.
If you've got a complaint about a federal judge, there's an inbox. And then there's somebody who reads what comes through the inbox. And then there are staff attorneys who oversee the investigation as to what the facts really are and evaluate it against the code of ethics. And then there's an independent body that makes a determination whether it complies with the code of ethics. And then there's a conclusion that is made public. That's standard. It's everywhere. And the Supreme Court won't do any of those steps for itself.
So let's assume for argument's sake that the same rules that apply to every other judge in the federal judiciary were to be applied to Supreme Court justices. What would be that independent oversight body that could make sure the standards in play were actually enforced, that they were binding rather than simply advisory?
Well, the most obvious one, and the way that the circuit courts of appeal all do it, is other judges. Now, because it's the Supreme Court, the other judges can't punish them. But if you had the 11 chiefs of the 11 circuit courts of appeal issue an opinion saying, in this matter, this justice acted in violation of the code of ethics as it is applied across all of our circuits, that would be such a powerful rebuke that it would have an effect on the Supreme Court's behavior, not only with respect to that specific rebuke, but it would encourage them to clean up their act so that they could avoid that kind of rebuke. So that's just one way of doing it. That's a pretty obvious way.
Senator Whitehouse, and we're talking with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island, who's doing a lot of work on trying to clean up this, what a lot of us think is kind of an ethics mess at the Supreme Court. Explain to our listeners why Clarence Thomas' wife Ginny involvement with trying to overthrow the election, and why Clarence Thomas's financial benefits from a very, very wealthy Republican donor should matter to our listeners, to citizens of the United States. Why this is a problem.
It's a problem because the central duty of a judge is impartiality, to decide cases without fear or favor. And when you are taking enormous gifts from people who have business interests that the court affects and political interests that the court affects, and then you go to the extra step of keeping it secret, it is highly corrosive of trust in that impartiality. And one aspect of impartiality is to not get involved in cases where your impartiality might reasonably be questioned. And the Thomas's participation in that January 6th investigation case flies in the face of the recusal requirements that apply to every other judge. And it illustrates the problem here of no decent process. Because the central question in that is, what did he know about his wife's behavior when he decided that case? Yeah. Because if he knew that she was a potential subject of the investigation, he should have recused himself. If he knew absolutely nothing about it, then maybe you could justify it. That's a fact question. And in any other court in America, staff attorneys would look into that fact question. The judge at issue would be asked a question, asked to give a statement about what the facts were, and then you'd proceed. Thomas has never had to answer the question what he actually knew about his wife's insurrection activities. That is the central question in whether he violated the recusal rules.
I don't know if you just said this to refresh people's recollection, and in the case where it came to light that she had communicated with people like the chief of staff for President Trump, the sole vote suggesting that none of the documents should be turned over just happened to be right. Clarence Thomas.
You know, Senator, Clarence Thomas' case to me is pretty egregious and pretty obvious. I did not realize, again, until preparing to talk to you today, that so many chief justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, trips to Israel that were paid for, not out of her own pocket. Sonia Sotomayor, I think she went to Portugal, not paid out of her own pocket. When I used to be a reporter, you couldn't, if you took a politician out for a $25 lunch, you had to pay for the $25 lunch. You couldn't have the politician pay for you. It was pretty rigorous. And Alito going out to Notre Dame talking about the abortion ruling, and Notre Dame obviously is a Catholic school, and they have not wanted people like Barack Obama to come speak there because Barack Obama was pro-choice.
That was in Italy, by the way, for Notre Dame, if I recall correctly. I believe where he spoke on behalf of the law, I think was in Italy.
I don't really care where he spoke. Yeah. It was they were making money from these colleges. I don't see why any of that is okay.
Well, all of it, at a minimum, ought to be disclosed. Yeah. But there's bad and there's worse. And worse is when on these secret, undisclosed vacations that are worth not $25, but by one estimate, $500,000 for one of Thomas's vacations, when you're not only on the vacation undisclosed, but on the vacation consorting with people who have huge interests around the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to keep it secret to boot. That's probably the worst of all, Justice Scalia used to take free hunting trips that he had set up where the owner of the hunting resort would invite him personally. He would claim that that was personal hospitality, even though he'd never met the owner of the commercial resort. But the invitation was personal. I mean, it's a laughable concept. And then he would not disclose the trip. And then you'd later find out that there were gun advocates on the trip, that there were fossil fuel folks on the trip, that there were Republican officials on the trip, that it was a conclave, not a vacation.
So, Senator Whitehouse, do you not, when you read the ProPublica thing, did you feel like that your head was going to pop off your shoulders? I mean, how do you deal with, I mean, we've all seen your whiteboard mastery, and well, forget that question.
We love the whiteboards.
Mitch McConnell comes back from, his medical leave, says they're complying with the highest ethical standards, were his words. But on the other hand, it appears that Lindsey Graham, at least to me, appears open to some movement here. What can the Senate, what can the Congress do, in your opinion, statutorily and constitutionally in terms of, I'll use the word regulating for lack of a better one, the Supreme Court, and what do you think you're likely to do?
I think Congress has solid authority to require basic ethics requirements in the executive branch of government over ourselves and in the judicial branch of government. What we would be regulating here would be the administrative conduct of judges, not the adjudicative conduct of judges. And I think we have authority there. Indeed, the violations that we're concerned about in the Thomas matter are violations of statutes, laws passed by Congress. So you can't say that we have no role. What we can do, I think, is require them to do exactly what all other federal judges do, which is to not only have a code of conduct, but have a process for making sure that it is actualized, that it is enforced, that it is real, and not just this decorative object hanging in space that they, in their own wisdom and opinions, can claim to be compliant with when they're not. And the other thing we can do is by shining a spotlight on this. I think that regular federal judges are furious about this because they know they can't pull this crap. They know what the Supreme Court justices are doing is nonsense. And yet when the Supreme Court says, nothing to see here, folks, this is just the way we all behave in the judiciary, we're following the ethics rules, that smears the entire rest of the judiciary and puts a shadow on all other judges' behavior. And other judges are not behaving like the Supreme Court justices, period, end of story. And to get them angry enough to push back on the Chief Justice and say, hey, knock it off, cut the crap, I think is a very lively and real potential avenue for solving this problem.
So that's what you can do. What do you think you're likely to do?
Well, it depends if we can get bipartisanship on some of this stuff. The idea that the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court alone doesn't have to have any ethics enforcement, I think is pretty hard for the Republicans to defend if we were to really push hard on it. As you said, Lindsey Graham has already said they should do the same reporting that we do, that senior executive officials do, that Circuit Court of Appeals judges do. That shouldn't be asking much. Everybody else already does it. So I think there's an opportunity here, and it just isn't quite clear yet how much we can get done by legislation and how much pushing the legislation will push the judges to push on the Supreme Court to get them to clean up their mischief.
You know, Senator Whitehouse, we've had some politicians in Massachusetts. I believe Ed Markey, Maura Healey. Who else said Thomas should go?
Markey and Healey both told us.
Yeah, both Governor Healey and Senator Markey. Do you think Justice Thomas, based on what we now know already, should resign?
Well, by the standard of previous resignations from the Supreme Court, we had a justice resign over the receipt of financial benefits far less than what Justice Thomas has received.
Is this Abe Fortas you're talking about?
That's Abe Fortas I'm talking about. I think it was $20,000 in payments for teaching that came through a fellowship that somebody he knew had set up for him so he could be compensated for his teaching. Okay. Not a $500,000 vacation,
Right.
Not yucking it up with Leonard Leo, the central spider in the web to capture the court, none of that stuff. But that implies a level of decency and desire to protect the court as an institution that is not manifest in these 6 Federalist Society justices. They're there, I think, on a mission. And if it takes a little damage to the court to accomplish the mission, well, that's just the price of, getting the world to be more aligned with how the big billionaires want it to be.
Senator, tell people who Leonard Leo is.
So Leonard Leo is the guy who made himself known to the big right-wing billionaires when he orchestrated the withdrawal by President Bush of his own legal counsel, Harriet Miers, as a Supreme Court nominee, right? The right-wing billionaires turned on a Republican president to make him humiliatingly have to withdraw his own White House counsel as nominee because they were afraid that she would be like Justice Stevens or Justice Souter, not adequately right-wing enough, though a Republican appointee. And into that vacancy, he put Sam Alito, who brought us the Dobbs decision. And then with that cred, he became the guy at the Federalist Society to fix the machinery for appointing and approving judges. He was behind the Trump list, the famous or infamous Trump list of Federalist Society judges that Trump promised. I think that brokered peace with the Koch political empire. And then his companies funded the ads for those Federalist Society justices. And he's deeply involved in advocacy through front groups to the Supreme Court, to the justices that he helped pick, whose confirmations he helped fund. And so he's deep, deep, deep in the network of Supreme Court capture that has been set up by these right-wing billionaires.
Just a couple of very quick things before you go, Senator. Did you answer Marjorie's question? Did you, about whether Thomas should step down? What do you think?
I did not, because I don't want to. That's not a realistic option, and I want to be putting my pressure where it's going to be effective.
Fine.
And where it's going to be effective is keeping the spotlight on.
Okay.
And if he were to resign, that would be an unexpected act of decency.
So May 2nd, is the hearing still happening even without Chief Justice Roberts, or no?
It is. We have a number of, I think, good and useful witnesses who are expert in this area, who can help lay out the case. It's also an opportunity for our Republican colleagues to exhibit what their position is going to be. Are they willing to go down with the ship with the Supreme Court because their donors are the same donors who paid to have the court captured, and their party is the one that's getting all the big wins from the captured court? Maybe. Or maybe there'll be some who will say, wait a minute, this is pretty indefensible. They shouldn't be doing this.
Last question.
That's an important TBD in the hearing.
Yeah. Last question from me, Sheldon Whitehouse. We really appreciate your time as always. And Marjorie has one quick one too. We are going to talk to our listeners in a minute about what we've been talking about for 25 years. Do you really care about what's going on in the Supreme Court? Are you someone who's going to vote for president based upon who he or she picks to the Supreme Court? And my contention historically is, well, it's the most important decision, maybe other than declaration of war, that a president makes. Most people don't give a damn. And Marjorie, when we were talking this morning, said they may not have given a damn, but abortion, Dobbs, has changed all that. Do you subscribe to her way of thinking?
I think that the days when it was Republican voters who were motivated by Supreme Court appointees and not Democratic voters have changed. And I think groups that track this can actually quantify that now Democratic voters are as or more animated by the Supreme Court as Republican voters.
Senator, Jim stole my question, so I don't have a final question. That is it.
Senator Whitehouse, we really appreciate your time, as always.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very
Thrilled
much.
to
You have a
have
big fan from Rhode Island who says you should run for president, Senator, so maybe you should give that some thought. Deb says she loves you and she wants you to run for president. So, in your spare time, maybe you can launch a campaign. Thank you very much for being with us.
Not likely.
Okay.
Good to see you. Good luck next week, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. By the way, we've said this before.
Thank you very much.
Go on YouTube and Google his tutorials on things like dark money on the floor of the Senate and the Senate Judiciary Committee. They're as important for you to know about, I think, as virtually anything in our democracy.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Senator.
We appreciate it, Senator.
Great.
Thank you for all your work on dark money, because it's really important stuff. Talk soon, I hope.
Thank you.
Talk to you.
We've been speaking with Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who's got a lot of big fans on the texter list. After a quick break, we're going to ask you what you think about the Supreme Court. As Jim just said, for years it has been the Republicans who have been really pushing to get their justices on the Supreme Court. The Federalist Society, which Senator Whitehouse just talked about, has been brilliant in pushing their justices, and now it has happened. So we want to know whether you are thinking about the Supreme Court as you think about candidates to vote for, certainly in national elections, because it's the president that's very involved in choosing justices for the Supreme Court. So you're listening to Boston Public Radio. You can call us or text us at 877-301-8970,
Next time on The World, re-examining the terrorist attack at the 1972 Olympics in Germany when Palestinian militants killed 11 Israelis. A group of historians is now being given unprecedented access to German records.
So police files, Secret Service files, and whatsoever.
Family members of the victims have been waiting 50 years. Next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And The Huntington, presenting Joy and Pandemic, a play by MacArthur Genius Grant recipient Taylor Mack and directed by The Huntington's new artistic director Loretta Greco. Now playing at the Huntington Calderwood BCA. huntingtontheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She's Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. I hope you just heard our conversation with Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who has made it a career focusing on dark money in the Supreme Court, buying Supreme Court confirmations, and who is now focused on the ethics or lack of ethics and trying to rein all that in terms of all of the justices who are subject to essentially no ethical guidelines and nothing binding on issues like recusal. We want to know what the answer to the question is that we just raised with Senator Whitehouse. Be honest. Do you give a damn about the Supreme Court? I have to say, one of the few things I'm really proud about our 25 years on the radio, every election cycle we have said to you, there's nothing more important when you pick the man or woman to be president of the United States and who he or she is going to pick to be on the Supreme Court. They serve for life. Coney Barrett, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh are, I believe, all in their young 50s. It is possible they will serve through the terms of as many as 8 presidents of the United States. So you can worry about the makeup of the House, you can worry about who the president is, which of course you should. These people have staying power, and as we've discussed ad nauseum, most of their decisions are anti-majoritarian, exactly in the opposite direction where the American people are. Do you care? And if you didn't care before, is Marjorie right, or is Whitehouse right, that abortion changed everything? 877-301-8970 to call us or text us.
We know what's really depressing about the corruption on the Supreme Court is that, in the last few years you thought, well, there's a lot of people in Congress who are corrupt. There's a lot of, some presidents you're not that crazy about. But you always kind of thought Republican or Democrat Supreme Court is a place where there were great scholars that were impartial, that respected the precedent, that respected the history of the Supreme Court, that, you took constitutional law maybe in college and you were in awe of all these great opinions written. And you're a lawyer.
Sort of.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I did take constitutional law in college, and you just had such a great respect. And now it's gone.
Well, come on, you discuss it. Didn't that change with the Anita Hill hearings in the 90s When
No,
you saw
I
that no one
kind of
gave a
thought-
damn about someone credibly accused of sexual
I thought,
harassment?
well, Jim, you forget those were early days. Those
No,
were
they were
early
early
days.
days.
Those were the days when women were getting chased around the offices, and just had to run faster than the guy that was going to do whatever he was going to do. It was a different kind of world then. And also, he was a black guy. The Supreme Court has not really had. I mean, he's the second justice after Thurgood Marshall.
That's
So
right.
there
That's
were
right.
different considerations then.
Yeah, you're
I
right.
thought he would be the outlier. I thought he would be,
That's a good
and for a
point.
long time he was the outlier. Remember, he never even talked. But now it's the fact that all 9 of them have signed on to this document saying, "Oh, there's no problem here," is really depressing. Anyway, 877-301-8970, 877-301-8970. Magritte from Danvers, thank you for calling.
Hey there.
Hi.
Hi.
I have always been into the Supreme Court and how whoever was running for president that was my key decision-making process.
Well, that's good.
Other people around me, though, people have said to me, you shouldn't let it run on one thing. There were lots of other issues. That's a pretty big issue.
So what do you tell those people, Marguerite? What'd you tell them?
I tell them they're wrong.
Exactly. Thank you for your call. We're with you. 877-301-8097. Let's lighten this up a little bit. Thomas's ability to be swayed was brought into question when it was discovered, as Marjorie said, that his wife, Ginny Thomas, was sending texts to Mark Meadows, chief of staff to Trump, about January 6th. Here's an April 2022 clip from SNL. Ginny Thomas is played by the great Kate McKinnon, and Kenan Thompson plays Clarence Thomas.
Yes, and I don't want any trouble. I take my duty as the Yoko Ono of the Supreme Court very seriously. All I want is a tidal wave of biblical vengeance to wash away the Biden crime family all the way to Gitmo, and then we release the Kraken.
Okay, well, that is terrific. Justice Thomas, she doesn't talk to you about this stuff, though, right?
Some say yes, some say no.
877-301-8097.
Well, I mean, what's so upsetting is that it not only is Ginny Thomas advocating for the overthrow of the election and sending all these emails and texts to Mark Meadows and claiming she and her husband don't discuss any of these things, even though she calls him her best friend and he calls her best friend.
And in the text, she references talking to her best friend about
That's
it.
correct.
Right.
Is the Supreme Court justices in some of their opinions quote the amicus briefs, if you call them, that's sent by
Friends
some
of the court, sure.
these people that are like out to lunch. Alito, basically in his last public statement, showed that he was using talking points from Fox News. Now, Fox News has been exposed as lying about whatever it is for money and ratings. So you kind of say to yourself, a Supreme Court justice is watching and digesting and using their arguments and his opinions.
Well, the president did.
Which one?
I think it was Donald Trump.
Well, Donald Trump. I mean, that's,
Well, he's the president.
He is the president. But I mean, again, I held the Supreme Court in higher esteem. Obviously, I'm wrong.
Steve on Cape Cod, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about whether the Supreme Court's composition actually matters to somebody besides me, Marjorie Whitehouse, and Marguerite. Hey there.
Hi there.
Hi.
Yes, I believe it does matter, and I think one of the solutions should be looked at is a term limit set for the Supreme Court. I was going to ask Senator Whitehouse that question, if they could look into. I've heard different stories about making them like odd years, so it's not the same party for years and years. Just set a Supreme Court term limit, and see if they could have a turnover there instead of having these people that were appointed back when VCRs were a big fad.
Yeah, well, let me respond to that, Steve, actually, is that, Nancy Gertner, former federal judge, she and another local guy, Larry Tribe from Harvard Law School, were on the Presidential Commission on the Supreme Court. And they wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post. They talked to me about it on TV, that they both went into the Presidential Commission supporting term limits and against the expansion of the court. And they came out in favor of expansion and maybe not as enthusiastic about term limits. And here's why. They concluded that to impose term limits on the Supreme Court, you have to change the Constitution, which is virtually impossible. But to expand the Supreme Court beyond its 9 members so there's more balance, has been done 9 times in American history by Congress, and Congress could do that by a simple vote. So they may agree with you in terms of the merits, but they believe the process to get you there is not doable. But Steve, thanks for your thoughts. I appreciate it. By the way, this whole expansion thing and this BS that the Democrats will be packing the court, who packed the court? Mitch McConnell. The refusal to even hold a hearing on Merrick Garland. All these damn things. The confirmation. How many days? Voting had already started when Coney Barrett was confirmed, yet there couldn't be a hearing on Merrick Garland because it was as close as, 8 months to election day?
Well, it's kind of like this whole thing about we're just going to lie about it and we don't care if people call us liars.
Exactly.
It's infected the Supreme Court. Because obviously the justices know they've got an ethics problem, right? Don't you think Elena Kagan and Sotomayor know they've got an ethics problem? Why did they sign this document?
Why do you think they signed the document? Do you think because Nancy White House and Gertner said almost the same thing. The sort of the Omerta, as he calls it, or the cops don't rat on cops kind of thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, we do ask police officers to rat on other police officers, even though you could argue that police officers are putting their lives on the line when they do challenge other police officers.
I'm totally with you.
Yet we're excusing people who are appointed for life. They can live and die as Supreme Court justices who aren't going to worry. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks that one of the Supreme Court justices is going to come out, and shoot their fellow justice for disagreeing with them. So we expect more from police officers or from teachers or from anybody else who's a regular Jane and Joe than we would from Supreme Court justices who don't have a risk. They're not going to throw each other off the court.
I'm with you. Lennon Beverly, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, good morning.
And to you.
Long-time listener. I think the second time I've gotten through.
Thank you.
I have no confidence in the Supreme Court ever. Like many of us, I grew up with a fairly robust civics program, and I thought very highly of the Supreme Court. I guess I didn't really understand the Dred Scott decision and the Plessy decision. I don't think I ever really understood, or maybe it wasn't explained. But I did understand the decision regarding the internment of Americans of Japanese descent during the Second World War, and that was kind of an eye-opener, It's like, wait a minute.
Also, do you know who was governor of California when the Japanese Americans were interned? Earl Warren, who went on to be a beloved liberal Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So what do you do now in light of you don't have confidence in him? Despite your lack of confidence, they have unlimited power over. I mean, in 1 week alone. Just to remind people. Wait. 1 week alone. Last was it June? Guns, abortion, and clean air were all given the middle finger by the justices. But go ahead, Len.
So, I'm not. I'm a retired person. I'm a former architect. I don't have any knowledge of the law, but I have read or have heard that Congress has the authority to limit their jurisdiction.
I believe that's true. I believe that is true. That's
even more powerful than packing the court. You just limit their jurisdiction, and c'est la vie. They're done.
C'est la vie.
But
thank you, Len.
What was different though to me is that you had Plessy and Dred Scott, which basically affirmed that segregation was fine, and Dred Scott couldn't get his freedom and stuff, and you had the Japanese internment thing, which is horrible. But then you had a whole bunch of civil rights decisions that were in favor of. From Brown versus Board of Education to affirmative action, things that were in favor of expanding civil rights and trying to make up for the racism against African Americans. So we were heading for a long time in the right direction. Now we're reversing.
Yeah, but just I know you're not saying this, but I think to clarify, even if we continued to go in the right direction, as you call it, and as I would probably call it, there should still be ethical standards for the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, no matter what they're doing, right or wrong.
But my overall point is that we were expanding rights.
Exactly.
And now we're going in the opposite direction and diminishing rights. And
was
I think
Dobbs not the first case where a constitutional right was taken away by the Supreme Court?
I'm not sure. I think so. I think so. I mean, the Supreme Court had been chipping away at abortion rights for a long time, but this was dramatic precedent. And look at how long has affirmative action been there for?
Well, it's going to disappear come June.
Yeah, it's going to disappear. So that's what I'm saying, that we're shrinking rights. And I think basically shrinking people's rights and shrinking people's freedoms is not really where we want to go.
I think I'm with you on that.
Anyway, we're taking a break now.
We are taking a break.
Okay, well, I'm revved up. I wasn't paying attention. We're taking a break. We're talking about the lack of ethics on the United States Supreme Court, whether this is something that is concerning you, whether the Dobbs decision, which took away a constitutional right of women's autonomy over their own bodies, is going to spur people to pay more attention to who's appointed to the Supreme Court in the future. Our number is 877-301-8970. You can call us or text us at that number. We're streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Views of the U.S. Supreme Court are as negative as they've been in 3 decades, and some progressives say the best way to fix that is by adding more justices. I'm Adam Riley. This week on Talking Politics, we size up a new campaign to expand the court, which kicked off in Boston this week, plus why some state legislators are pushing for a 4-day work week. Join me for Talking Politics tonight at 7 on GBH2 and online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Jane Fonda, Van Jones, Dr. Laurie Santos of the Happiness Lab, and explorer Celine Cousteau. bostonspeakers.org. And Tools of the Mind, the research and play-based curriculum offers pre-K and K teachers tools designed to help ensure children develop cognitive, social, emotional, and self-regulation skills. toolsofthemind.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. We're talking about the power of the Supreme Court, the lack of ethics of some members of the Supreme Court, the hope for effort by the United States Senate to rein it in, and whether you give a damn about how out of control, how rogue-like this court has gone. Before we get back to your calls and texts, we want to invite you to a special BPR after-hours event. I don't think we've ever done this. Tuesday night, May 2nd, is that right? Yes, it is. We're taping an interview with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley for a whole hour. You can ask her questions if you're here too. Plus, we'll have a live performance by the fantastic kids from something called the Boston Arts Academy Spirituals Ensemble. We saw them sing at Mel King's funeral a week or two ago.
They were spectacular.
They are otherworldly great. It's here at the library. Again, that's Tuesday night, next Tuesday. We have a show here during the day. Back at night at 6. There's beer, wine, finger food. It's free and open to the public. However, since it's after hours, you do have to RSVP. Go to gbhnews.org/BPR to register. 877-301-8970.
Okay, a couple of good texts here. Stephen from Rhode Island says, I'm a Suffolk Law student about to take constitutional law final Monday, so I've been reading a lot of Supreme Court opinions. There's a marked difference in more recent ones. Read Roe and then read Dobbs. The latter is like, and he's right, a Fox News piece. Like everything he touches, Trump has cheapened the court by hiring justices on the agenda rather than on merit. I have little faith in the current court. And then we have Sam from Fairhaven, who describes himself as a center-right individual, but he says he's extremely impressed and fully supports Senator Whitehouse efforts toward the Supreme Court. My number one issue in voting for any elected office is the candidate's competency and ability to do the job. I then look at their positions on specific issues. And, you know, the other thing that's changed about the Supreme Court is that often justices would evolve in their opinions. I think the most famous one was David Souter from New Hampshire. I think he was appointed by Bush the First. I'm not sure.
Well, Earl Warren. I mean, based
Earl
on
Warren, that was overseeing the internment, and then he was the most poverty programs, civil rights programs. Earl Warren was a very expansive court. But that doesn't really happen anymore because the justices are so steeped in their opinions before they get on the court. There's not that movement that there used to be. And by the way, it was always in the same direction. It was from crushing rights to expanding rights. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
well,
you're right.
And
you're right.
it was for both, right?
Yeah. So one last thing before we get back to the calls. You just mentioned that caller said, what Trump did with his justices. The one thing you got to say for Trump, I'm going to play you something we've played before. He said exactly what he was going to do. He called into our show during the New Hampshire primary in 2015, and we asked him if he had this is Trump, if he had a litmus test for appointments, nominations to the Supreme Court.
Well, I'm pro-life, and I would put in pro-life. And
we want many different qualifications. You know, we want high degree of intelligence is a very important qualification.
And by the way, the 3 justices he picked all are really smart. You may not like what they're doing, and they are anti-choice. The best part of this story, which we've told you before, I just want to take a minute to do, he says he wants pro-life judges. The immediate interview he does after us, people were lined up to do interviews. A woman says to him, I just heard you say you have a litmus test. You want what you call pro-life judges. Can you tell us one you would pick? And he said, without missing a beat, because I was sure he couldn't name anybody, he said, of course I can. My sister is a federal appellate court judge. I'd pick her. Now, what's wrong with that, Marjorie?
Well, she's pro-choice.
Exactly. She was pro-choice. 877-301-8970.
And by the way, I would tell my quick story about going to an Easter Mass with my kids in New York City about 3 years ago. And they list often in the program how many people donated money. And there was a woman whose middle name was Trump, who had donated like $5,000 or something to the 3-day Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing on Easter. I thought, God, that's really strange. I wonder if she's any relation to the president. Then the Jesuit priest gets up and gives a sermon all about immigration and everything that President Trump. It's basically a diatribe against President Trump in the church that his sister gave $5,000 to. So my point is that I'm not sure that the president and his sister are very much aligned.
Or did he even know, frankly?
Maybe he didn't even know.
Bob in
anyway,
Oklahoma, you're
Bob.
calling in. Welcome. Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My statement is actually I wish Justice Thomas would have retired back in 2020 or 2019.
Yeah.
So Trump would have had another appointee.
Yeah.
And because
you're really happy with the first 3?
Yes, I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe in having the court should rule by popular opinion. They should rule by what the Constitution says and the law says.
Well, you know, the Constitution said, according to to a different Supreme Court 50 years ago, that privacy rights implied in the Constitution protected a woman's right to reproductive freedom. So that was not only the law of the land, that was what the Constitution said according to the Supreme Court. And I'm sure you know, Bob, that was as precedent setting as precedent is. And each of those 3 justices during their hearings for confirmation said they would of course respect precedent, which they overwhelmingly did not do. Did that trouble you at all?
Not in this case. I mean, because it goes back to the states where the states have the control.
But with all due respect, Bob, you can't say precedent matters when you like the precedent, and precedent doesn't matter when you don't like the precedent. You either support that or you don't. You know, that's sort of...
Yeah. Bob, thank you for the call, though.
it.
But we should point out, though, that the justices don't believe the issue of abortion should come back to the states, because Alito was the mifepristone fight would impact the whole country.
Every state, including ours.
Yeah, so it's fairly clear that was another lie. And by the way, they always talk about the Ginsburg rule, as if Ruth Bader Ginsburg did not say where she stood on abortion.
In terms of what she said or didn't say during her confirmation.
She did. So they've twisted that around, too. It's almost like you're down the rabbit hole all the time. And everything somebody says, you better check it out, because half the time people are telling you things they just
But you know where that comes
up.
from? We've discussed this before, too. In the brilliant series that Michael Kirk and Frontline do every presidential election cycle, where they do a 2-hour profile of each of the major candidates, he talks about Trump, and he talks about the impact that McCarthy's sidekick, the lawyer, what's the name of the lawyer? Joe McCarthy's sidekick.
Oh, Joe McCarthy. Roy Cohn.
Roy Cohn had,
Yeah,
Roy Cohn, after the Trumps, the father and the son, Donald Trump and his father, lost a housing discrimination case decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
The lawyer was Roy Cohn. Were found to have discriminated against black people. They came out to the steps to talk to the media, and what did they say?
They said they won.
They said they won. They just boldly asserted
but they said they
that
won.
they won, and that's essentially what Trumpism and this thing you're describing is.
And that's the old line, you repeat a lie long enough, people believe the lie. And that's kind of what's happened, and it's moved beyond the president to other forms of government, and apparently it's moved on to the Supreme Court. But you got to give this to Trump. I mean, he said he was going to appoint those justices.
Exactly my point.
And he did. So when you have these evangelicals that oddly seem to be aligned with a guy who's, even though they compare him to Jesus, I don't really get how they get from Trump to Jesus, but in any case, they do. They can say, hey, We don't care. We don't care about his private morals. He got us those justices. That's what we wanted. And that the anti-abortion bent of those judges is what we hoped we'd get.
Same guy, by the way, who's a defendant in a rape trial going on today in New York City with E.G.
Right.
Carroll.
Ellen in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Ellen, what's up?
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to say, when you asked about what we can do about the Supreme Court, is Americans need to pay more attention. They need to be serious about what is going to happen in their lives. Hillary Clinton warned us about this, and everybody was like, "Oh, I don't like her voice." Okay, well,
pretty good.
Do you like this?
Do you like this?
Fabulous. You know,
Yeah.
it is amazing how much we put up with. We could change. We literally could change everything. The people that are elected are about 1,000 people. We're 315 million strong, and we do nothing.
Nothing.
We don't pay attention.
Nothing.
We don't
You're right.
read. We binge watch. We could tell you everything that happened about Game of Thrones, but absolutely nothing about what's going on that will literally affect our lives, our children's lives, and our grandchildren's lives.
You want to talk about the Red Wedding for a few minutes, Ellen, or not? Maybe not. I'm sorry.
You know, Ellen, you are singing my song because I think Elizabeth Warren, if you look at the position she takes, they are right down where the American people are on guns, on child care, on health care, on whether you get ripped off by these big corporations and banks and Citibank or any of these places. They're all right in the middle. But she's described, Elizabeth Warren, that radical left, and we don't like her because she reminds me of my first wife or something like that. It's really incredible. I don't know if we're just immature or if it's like you say, or it's anti-woman or what, but you're right. We seem to vote against our own self-interest in...
What's the matter with Kansas?
Exactly, in so many cases. So do you have an answer, Ellen, for why we do that? It's just watching too much TV, is that it?
One of the no, it's just... I think people should watch TV. I think people should relax. I think every American is working really hard, and they're trying their best, in my opinion. That's 90% of people. And then there's the people who fall into being duped by people who have very, very small interests that feed into their bank account.
Yeah, but the only thing, Ellen, you failed...
You want to stop inflation? Stop buying stuff.
Yeah, well, I think inflation is a real problem.
I don't know if you mentioned this. The problem is we didn't like her voice, Ellen. That was a real problem. So, Ellen, thanks for a great call.
You know what we didn't like? Chris Matthews on MSNBC, the supposedly big lefty station. I guess it is a pretty lefty station. You know what he was complaining about?
I do know what he's complaining
about. Her cankles.
I do know that.
I didn't even know what cankles were.
We had a colleague who used to do that, too, on our old radio
That's right.
station.
He thought Hillary Clinton's ankles were too wide, and I think that should disqualify her immediately. Well, he's no longer on MSNBC.
Why is that?
I think did he get in some woman thing?
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay, Derek from New Hampshire, thank you for calling.
Hey, Derek. Hey, Derek.
Oh, I don't know where Derek is.
Hey, Derek. Derek, we'll put you on hold. We'll try to get back to you in a minute if we have time. Thank you. Whatever. Scott and Taunton, what's up?
Hey, just pulling over here because I'm delivering truck parts. And
excellent.
That's not cool. All right. Well, two things that I don't think have been touched on, a kind of hand in glove type situation, is that it's as much Trump that they're doing a grift.
Well, it is grifting. You're right. They're grifters.
It is grifting.
That's exactly what it is. I agree. You didn't have to pull over for that. What's the other one?
Can you imagine, Scott? You're on the luxury, they call it a super yacht. It's not just a yacht. It's a super yacht and the private plane, a $500,000 vacation. Can you imagine what that would be like? $500,000. What was it, a week long?
I don't know.
I don't know, but it must be pretty neat for kind of money in a week.
What was the other point, Scott?
Well, how other countries perceive this, especially the part about the grift. Emerging democracies. They figure, how are we going to be successful when the United States can't even get it done?
I think those are two fine points there. Thank you for pulling over, and thank you for calling, Scott. We really appreciate it.
You know, a couple of people mentioned Citizens United, which allowed the, why don't you explain that?
Unlimited giving,
Attorney
essentially.
Rowdy.
Unlimited giving, corporations giving.
Yeah.
I mean, Barack Obama, that was speaking of Alito, wasn't that the case that Barack Obama said I think in 2010 in the State of the Union or something, was going to destroy democracy? And there was a Supreme Court justice sitting there who I believe said, "You lie." That was Samuel Alito. I believe that was what it was about.
Okay.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, one of my colleagues, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about Citizens United.
Bruce in Westboro says not only should we have term limits for the Supreme Court, we should make them retroactive.
That's pretty good. You know, I had what's his face? Who's the Breyer? Breyer was on TV
Stephen
with me a couple
Breyer.
of years ago.
He's from Cambridge.
I know he is.
Your
and
neck of the woods.
He was fine with term limits as long as they were not terribly short. And unfortunately, he's not on the court anymore.
Well, there should be term limits for everybody. Dianne Feinstein is unable to vote, and because she's unable to vote and participate because she's 88?
89.
89, okay. And the Democrats who have some power right now appointing judges are held up in that.
That's right.
I mean, do you think we need term limits, Jim, when you look at her and Grassley out in Iowa?
I think she may have another kind of term limit, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
So,
well, maybe not. Who knows?
Maybe
It could go
not.
on forever.
Maybe
Anyway,
forever.
coming up after the break, we're going to be talking with, who are we talking about? I think we're talking to Michael Curry. He's coming up
Who are we
after.
talking to?
He's coming
Oh,
up after the break. The SJC has reinstated criminal charges on the Holyoke Soldiers' Home. We're going to talk about that with him and a bunch of other stuff. He's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH at the Boston Public Library.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and United Healthcare, providing health plan coverage options for New England businesses and their employees. You can learn more at uhc.com. That's uhc.com. Nothing will stop two lovers from following their hearts, not even scandals and nosy nobles. Prepare to be swept away by a fearfully romantic tale of young love. Don't miss the premiere of Tom Jones, Sunday at 9 on GBH2.
I'm production engineer Dave Goodman, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Brady, head on Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. The highest court in Massachusetts has reinstated criminal charges against the leaders of the Holyoke Soldiers' Home, where more than 70 veterans died in a COVID outbreak. We'll speak with Michael Curry, head of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, about this and about Mike Pence's testimony before a federal grand jury investigating Trump's role on January 6th. Then it's media maven Sue O'Connell discussing the death of Jerry Springer and two of his most famous shows, I Married a Horse and Threesomes with Grandma.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Harry Belafonte was a legend in so many circles: civil rights, music, Hollywood. He died this week at 96. We'll remember him with Executive Arts Editor here at GBH, Jared Bowen. We'll also discuss Jared's recent sit-down with Governor Maura Healey on Open Studio. Then, the great Patty Larkin joins us for a live Music Friday performance ahead of a benefit show this weekend in Lexington. It's all to come. Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. A series of Russian cruise missiles and drones have killed at least 19 people in Ukraine. That's according to the country's Interior Ministry. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports the attack was the first large-scale assault by Russia's military in nearly 2 months.
Most of the dead are in the city of Uman, south of Kyiv. A Russian missile hit a 9-story apartment building while most people were sleeping. Ukraine's Interior Minister Ihor Klimenko spoke on local television while standing in front of a damaged apartment building, still smoldering from the missile attack.
Security services have opened a criminal investigation. Forensic specialists are coming from Kyiv to help document this war crime as soon as possible.
Russian missiles also hit the central city of Dnipro, killing a 31-year-old woman and a 2-year-old child. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
Parts of Yosemite National Park are closed today ahead of expected flooding. A massive snowpack, which forced the park to close earlier this year, is forecast to melt and increase river flows. Rona Salisbury, head of the park's Visitors Bureau, says the valley closure is tough on local businesses coming so soon after this winter's deep snow.
Our local mom and pop businesses have suffered, a lot through all of this. And, we just see this sunshine coming out. We're all excited again, and darn it, now there's too much water. But, I think we're resilient. The communities are very resilient.
The National Park Service on Twitter says it expects the closures to remain in effect until at least next Wednesday. Stocks opened mixed this morning on Wall Street as the Commerce Department delivered a lackluster report on consumer spending last month. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average is trading higher at this hour, up 199 points.
Consumer spending was one of the bright spots in an otherwise downbeat GDP report Thursday, but analysts warn much of that spending increase came at the very beginning of the year, and this morning's report confirms that. Spending in March was basically flat. People spent less money on goods last month and more money on services. Personal income rose by 0.3%, and cautious consumers socked more of that money away. The personal savings rate rose to 5.1%. The Commerce Department's inflation yardstick, which is closely watched by the Federal Reserve, shows prices in March were up 4.2% from a year ago. Not counting food and energy prices, so-called core inflation was 4.6%. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Stocks continue to trade higher on Wall Street at this hour. The Dow was up 202 points, the Nasdaq up 32. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom. I'm Henry Santoro. A federal report that could halt plans to build a machine gun range on the Upper Cape will soon go to the public for comment. The EPA's review finds gunfire could contaminate local drinking water. Andrew Gottlieb of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod is opposed to the Army National Guard's proposed gun range.
The EPA analysis confirmed and echoed what a lot of us were saying for a couple of years about this project, that it represented an unnecessary and unacceptable level of risk to our water supply.
A public hearing for local residents scheduled for May 24th. The National Guard says it'll continue to advocate for the proposed range. The state is investing in its future with the cranberry industry. At the same time, researchers are adapting to the effects of climate change on that crop. The UMass Cranberry Research Station recently spent $8 million in state funding to expand its Wareham station. Director Hilary Sandler says the new labs will address warming weather, and she adds that nighttime temperatures in the fall are rising higher than growers hope to see for the cranberries to develop their deep color.
Those warm temperatures we are seeing really degrade the quality of the fruit. So the growers are waiting to harvest because they need the color, but at the same time the fruit are breaking down on the vine. So it's this push-pull situation going on.
Massachusetts is the second biggest cranberry producer in the country behind Wisconsin. 60 degrees in Boston. I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments' team of specialists offer guidance on investing, retirement income, and Social Security. FisherInvestments.com. Investments in securities involve the risk of loss.
The rest, okay?
He's Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Wow.
Thank you very much. That was not the voice of Michael Perry.
We are everywhere.
Can I mention two things before we start here? One of the things we love about the library on Friday, beyond the fact that it's Friday and we love the library, is we always do music. One of my favorites, Patty Larkin.
Oh, my favorite.
So
One of my
excited.
favorites,
Is going to perform in the 1 o'clock hour, which I'm just totally thrilled
Maybe
about.
she'll do something from The Sound of Music, which I was at the last time I saw her was at the Sound of Music revival
Is that
from
true?
20 years ago when they re-released the movie.
Well, let's hope not. Okay,
And
now
the Little Lies.
Now, second thing I want to do, we were remiss. Marjorie and I participated last night in a fabulous event. We'd like you to check out the
Oh,
organization.
my God, yeah.
Urban Improv, Rehearsal for Life, do wonderful things with kids in school. teaching them how to deal with social and emotional issues through performance and role-playing. It's called Banned in Boston, and a lot of media people, quote, perform, for lack of better expression. Marjorie was in a group called Nudists from Newton.
That's
that
right.
was her thing.
That's right.
Last night, the governor did a shtick.
She was
Where
great.
she was a riot. Diana DiZoglio sang a Whitney Houston tune last night.
She's got some
A lot
voice.
of media, business leaders, Lee Pelton, a whole bunch of great people. Check out the organization, Urban Improv, Rehearsal for Life. They do wonderful work. Someone else who does wonderful work is with us now. We said it was going to be Michael Curry. It is not. He'll be in a few minutes. Who is this? Oh, this is Sue O'Connell.
It's me.
This is media maven Sue O'Connell. Sue is the co-publisher of Bay Windows and South End News and contributor to Current on NBCLX and NECN. Hello, Media Maven.
Good day, Jim.
Good day
Thank
to you.
Thank you, Jim.
Exactly.
So let's start with the rape trial of it's a civil trial of the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. E. Jean Carroll is suing him, says that he took her into they went in together actually into a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room, supposedly fooling around with how they were going to buy lingerie, and then
Lightheartedly flirting.
Yeah,
verbally.
lightheartedly flirting.
Lingerie not for her.
For someone
he
else.
wanted to buy lingerie
Someone
for somebody
else.
else. Right.
Someone else. Anyway, I'm curious what you think about the cross-examination by Trump's lawyer yesterday in court.
Well, I don't think it's a surprise having seen Joseph Tacopina on some of the talk shows ahead of time that he's not what you would call a lawyer with a sensitive touch or a lawyer who would be sophisticated and able to cross-examine a witness, which she should be. I mean, it's a civil law case here, a civil case. Trump is being accused of a couple of things, and as is his right, she should be cross-examined and challenged on some of the facts. The issue in the way that we hope that we have evolved is that when you have a victim of a sexual assault or a child who's a victim, that you question them in a way that does not re-traumatize them. And although, as you pointed, Marjorie, before we went on the air, we don't get to see this, so we're hearing this secondhand.
Which is disgraceful.
But challenging a victim, especially a rape victim or a sexual assault victim, asking why you didn't scream, or some of the other things that...
Why she didn't call the cops. Which, by the way, very few rape victims do.
Right.
Now, I think it's only a third do in 2023, so you can imagine what it was 30 years ago, because... At least he didn't ask her the question they used to ask women all the time, what were you wearing?
Right.
He did talk about her high heels, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did. And that, again, he's a throwback to 30, 40 years ago. I can't imagine what E. Jean Carroll had to go through on the stand to manage this and not lose her cool. I mean, she is a tough woman who has worked in the New York media business, so she certainly gave it back to him a couple of times. But it's outrageous, and it's disgusting, and it's unnecessary. So it's, again, part of the Trump platform, being cruel just to be cruel.
By the way, we should just say when Sue or Marjorie or somebody is saying we can't hear or see, it's because, as we've said 1,000 times before, cameras are not allowed in federal courtrooms, which is an abomination as far as we're concerned.
Just to give a little background on this case, E. Jean Carroll didn't talk about this rape for years and years and years. And like thousands of Americans, women across the country, during the Me Too movement, when Harvey Weinstein, who'd been raping women for decades, was finally nailed. I mean, I guess when Gwyneth Paltrow said he came after her, then the tide turned and people paid attention. And she was inspired to tell her story.
Because of the Me Too movement.
Because of the Me Too movement. That's why she shut up all these years.
And because of a change in the statute of limitations in New York, she was able to bring the civil charges and the defamation charges.
Because she was, I did not know this, she was fired by Elle magazine after Trump went after her with these repeated insults on Twitter. Then she tried to go to Substack, which is a website runs a lot of great writing. She was attacked there as well. He's gone after her consistently, called her a liar, said she made these things up, said it was for money. She made $70,000 from the book, which is not exactly going to get her that far.
Right.
And by by the way, the women he's accused of doing this for writing books, they haven't written books.
And they haven't made any money.
Can I just have one thing to that? Because it's not a correction, but an addendum. One, you said correctly she hadn't spoken about it publicly. She did contemporaneously
that's right.
tell two of her friends, and one of her friends said to her, I would not go to the police. The reason being, Donald Trump will destroy you. It is not worth it. So she did do contemporaneous disclosure to two close friends.
They testified.
And it's also important to point out that women who do call the cops and do go to trial in these cases, they lose overwhelmingly, because we want to have a perfect victim, so-called.
Right. So he's, again, this is just a throwback that keeps everything locked where it is. I also want to note, I don't know if you saw, someone was tweeting, excuse me, the jury, what do you call it, Jim, when you ask the jury?
Voir
dire, asking them about what kind of newspapers or magazines they read. It's a sad state for Americans.
They read everything like Sarah
No, they
Palin?
don't read anything. They
Good,
read
perfect.
nothing. They were like, no Elle magazine, no New York Times, no nothing. Somebody
Great.
was just like, well, occasionally if I'm in a waiting room, I read a magazine.
Okay, so let's go from one person who can't stand Trump to another person who can't stand Trump, Tucker Carlson.
Oh, boy.
He finally spoke in the oddest video on Twitter that didn't really address him leaving. He just talks about how much he's learned since taking some time off. Here's a piece of it.
The other thing you notice when you take a little time off is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we had them. Trust me, as someone who's participated.
Well, that's really useful. By the way, our favorite satirist, Andy Borowitz, wrote that the headline today is Tucker Carlson enters rehab after texts show him telling the truth, which is a problem.
He keeps talking about those few of us who tell the truth when he's just been exposed as lying nonstop about the election and lying nonstop about the president in his own writing.
What I loved about this video, too, is it really speaks to the cone that he was living in, right? I mean, all of us who are in the media, who I know, consume a lot of media. You're watching Fox at night, Marjorie, just to try and make sure you can, at least represent the other side.
Until my blood pressure goes through the roof.
He's saying he's surprised of what's happening on television. I mean, Tucker Carlson is going to do what Tucker Carlson does, which is lie. He's going to create his own reality. I don't know that he's got a future. I mean, I've heard you guys talking all week about the platform, and this is what it is about. It's not necessarily Tucker Carlson, unless he runs for president, in which case, that's going to be a whole other thing.
Glenn Beck was huge. Bill O'Reilly was bigger.
And now we don't talk about them at all.
Nobody talks about them.
Right.
So, in any case, can we talk about somebody who some listeners are going to say we shouldn't talk about? But the reason we're talking about trash television is because this guy, who was the former mayor of Cincinnati, totally changed talk television forever. His name was Jerry Springer. He died yesterday, the day before. Here's a little sampling of some of the high or lowlights from his television show.
My guests today say life is all about doing what makes them happy. Please meet Ken. He says he's weak for the booty. Please meet Edwin. He says he's not sure if the mother of his child is the woman for him. Edwin, what's going on?
She handed me a piece of paper, Jerry. On the piece of paper it said, you plus me equals 3. It took me a little bit to kind of get it, but all right. She ended up being pregnant.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's what 3 is.
Yeah, that's the third one.
Yeah, that's not a threesome you want. Yeah, okay.
Second here. Kitty, let me see if I have this right. You're having sex with your grandson?
Yes, sir.
By the way, two of his most famous shows, speaking of that, were Threesomes with Grandma and the infamous I Married a Horse.
All right, so I just want to say,
he was huge.
We dodged a bullet with Jerry Springer because
How so?
you may not remember this, but he was a candidate for mayor.
He was mayor.
Yeah, but while he was a candidate for mayor in Ohio, he was caught paying a prostitute by check.
By check?
This is in
my goodness.
1982. And so what I learned from that is don't pay prostitutes with checks. And so far, here I am. I think that's worked out pretty well.
Good.
Thank you very much. But he could have ended up being president. I mean, who knows what we would have had. What a terrible show that was.
Am I right, though? Was that the first of this
Yes.
ilk?
Well, you had what was his name? I always want to say Morton Downey.
Morton Downey Jr.
Yeah, Morton Downey
I remember
Jr.
him,
He used to hold up the sign that said, and then you had Jerry Springer, and Jerry then gave us, what's his name?
Exactly.
Yeah, Povich.
Maury Povich.
Maury Povich. And it was terrible. And now, even these shows of exploiting people, a few people I saw who were guests, and I use this in air quotes, homeless teens who his producers went out and solicited to come on, paid them $200, and then had the audience yell at them and call them names. I mean, it's just the guests. At the time, it was funny when it started to happen. And then a number of sociologists and people smarter than me started saying, why are we using underprivileged people, poor people, people on the lower rungs of the economic world as entertainment for us? That's basically, we're exploiting poverty for entertainment. And sometimes when you're watching these shows, they get paid to come on. I mean, even Judge Judy, which I watch every single day.
I'm sure you do.
In some regard, you're exploiting their pain for entertainment. And that's what I worry about with Jerry Springer.
Since you're a follower of pop culture, one of the things I meant to look up and forgot, what's the state of the relationship in the person who married the horse? Do you have any idea if are they still together?
I have to say this too.
What's that?
A lot of really bad people die. Right, and we always have this conversation, or controversial figures who people love, but
we had
they
this
did bad things.
conversation about Scalia when Antonin Scalia died.
How long do you wait before you say critical things about the public person that died? Jerry Springer has had more negative things said about him than any war criminal who has died. So I think that the public has spoken.
We're talking to Sue O'Connell.
So I saw this very interesting story about Dwayne Wade, who used to be a big star with the Miami Heat basketball team. He's leaving Florida.
Yeah, he has been very supportive of his trans child and his family. They've got a big Instagram account. He has been one of the leading voices in LGBTQ family rights. And he has made it clear that due to the policies that are in place, the laws that are in place in Florida, and I imagine he would say other places as well, that he doesn't feel that his child and his family would be safe in Florida. And I think that we're hearing a lot from families who are concerned about a number of things. I heard from a family who has a trans freshman in high school and does not want to travel to Florida for vacation, which they usually do because they're worried if they have a medical emergency and they have to go to a hospital, will their trans child be treated? Will they be arrested? Will they be reported? So we have divided. I mean, I salute his bravery and his family's bravery because, there's a backlash that he gets for this. But there's a whole bunch of people out there who have the means to make these kind of decisions. I mean, there's also people living in Florida that can't live. But this is the kind of world that we are setting up.
You're mentioning the family who's saying, I'm not going to go to Florida because I have a trans kid and I'm worried what will happen to me, to my trans kid, to whomever. That's one thing, which is a variation on a theme. I was sort of stunned when I read a headline until I read the whole story, and what you interpreted for us. San Francisco has voted to end its boycott of anti-LGBTQ states. California is apparently on the precipice of doing the same thing. Tell us what their argument is, that it's not caving to the DeSantises of the world, but what?
It's not helping the people who are there.
Yeah.
Right. We're having this discussion within the LGBTQ community regarding Florida. Right. Should Florida, I know the political group, I forget their name, but the Mass Equality Equal in Florida, a couple of weeks ago called out and said, it's a dangerous place to be. Don't come.
So did the NAACP in Florida, by the way.
But on the other hand, we have a very vibrant LGBTQ community there and also people in need. So when you're boycotting it, are you actually getting the message across that is helpful, or are you just denying the accessibility?
What's amazing? There's so much. I mean, we talk to you about it every week about this tsunami of anti-LGBTQ legislation. I think I got this right. San Francisco, under the regulations they just repealed, we're boycotting 30 states.
Yes.
30 states. And their thesis is, you say, not only is it not accomplishing the desired end, but it's also costing San Francisco and on a larger scale California a ton of dough in terms of getting whatever they need for their citizenry. Yeah. So I hope you're going to say you buy it. Is this BS or?
No, I absolutely buy it because I also think when they said they were boycott, it would be a short-term thing.
Yeah.
It's been a long-term thing, and the boycott, especially when it's your tax dollars and when it's for citizens, and when you want to make sure you're impacting the people that you want to impact. I don't think that the areas that San Francisco and some of these other cities and towns have been boycotting have felt anything, right? I don't really think that they've been complaining about it because the pain hasn't made them change. And they are, in fact, being hurt by the ability of things that they can buy for manufacturing.
But you do wonder.
I will say, though, like when someone like the World Series or the All-Star Game, when they do it, when there's a one-time event that's going to bring a lot of tourism into your city or town or state. When they do it, I think it has a greater impact.
Didn't the NBA do that with North Carolina?
Yeah, because it brings more news to it. Yeah. It's a one-time event. It doesn't totally disrupt the economy, and it rewards some state or city that's doing the right thing.
Can I just question your motives for a second, if I may?
Disney World?
I was just going to say, this is the woman who takes her kid to Disney World like every other week.
5 times in 20 years. Every 5 years we go.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not bad.
I'm going to bring my gun next time I go. So
but you
I'll
do
be able
wonder,
to go through Florida.
We've talked about this with Trenny Kusnierek from NBC Sports Boston, or Boston Sports. Is NBC Sports Boston?
Casey.
Trenny Casey. Oops. She used to be Trenny Kusnierek. Now she's Trenny Casey. She's got married.
See how easy it is to get used to gender changes and name changes? It's very easy.
It's very easy. But anyway, about Major League Baseball has spring training. A lot of the teams are in Florida for spring training. A lot of them aren't. I guess they're in Arizona or they're someplace else. But the Red Sox are there. The Yankees are there. I mean, maybe those places. I don't know if that could ever happen.
Listen, if 4 or 5 major players, on a couple of teams in Florida say, I don't feel safe being in Florida, that's when things will change. I mean, this whole, I know we're not scheduled to talk about it, but this whole Disney-DeSantis war.
Go ahead, talk about it.
Disney, for those of you who don't know, the Reedy Creek District, which was, not a very constitutional way of Walt Disney setting up Orlando in a really sneaky way, was running. It was an independent business
district. It's like a country within a country.
It was, yeah. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Which was good for the taxpayers.
Well, it's good for everybody.
Right?
It ended up being good for everybody. But, you could make the argument that they shouldn't do it, but that's not why DeSantis is doing it. So DeSantis dissolved it, and then, lo and behold, found out that Disney, again, is smarter than him and had put in place rules that said that the existing rules got to stay in place. And then DeSantis tried to do something else, and now today saying that they can't build any more parks. And now, I think this week, Disney now is suing DeSantis for freedom of speech. And this is continuing on. Disney is the largest private employer of people in Florida. The largest. It is one of the largest economic drivers in this state, and I just think that this is going to be a pain for DeSantis to.
Were you listening? As I read a text from somebody who said, if Ron DeSantis can't beat Donald Duck, he sure as hell can't beat Donald Trump, which may be true. There's also a lot of blowback in the Republican Party because they love big business, and this is the ultimate big business.
Yeah, how can you be pro-business if you're fighting Mickey?
And it's also that's a place where many people that kids want to go to Disney World. That's a big treat.
Yep.
Let's save up so we can go to Disney World.
So you know what Disney did? You know how Disney responded? They announced last week that in Disneyland in Anaheim, they are having their first ever official LGBTQ+IA event called After Dark to celebrate a gay Disney event in Anaheim.
But I thought Disney was so pro-LGBTQ.
They are pro-LGBTQ. So they haven't had an official event. They have been open and welcoming to gay Disney when folks get together and wear T-shirts and go. And they have been very clear that they think they have a lot of gay employees and they want to serve everyone. So they head back to DeSantis kind of by California by having this first official LGBTQ
We should say,
event.
by the way, this whole battle started, I don't know if you said this, because they have so many, not only customers, but employees who are LGBTQ, they came out publicly opposed to the Don't Say Gay legislation in Florida.
They were late doing it. The former CEO.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You're right.
The former CEO said nothing, and a lot of the LGBTQ employees and allies and people like me pushed back, and now they have the old CEO back, who's got to try and clean it up.
Listen to this text from Kim in Boston. I don't know about an official boycott, but I'm the parent of a high school senior, and I, along with a number of other parents, advised our daughters not to apply to college in states like Texas or Florida because they will not be safe if something happens on campus.
That's another issue with students now. not only just with the LGBTQ stuff, but with abortion access, safe abortion
Or
access.
black kids.
All sorts of kids are deciding, I'm not going to go to that state.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of, I think, marketplace impact that will do something.
Now, before you go, when I mentioned to the audience that a little bit later we're going to have the great Patty Larkin singing, which is pretty good lure to come down.
Pretty good.
We have something else. I want to see if you find this is a lure.
Okay.
You see who's standing over there who's a later guest?
Oh, it's Jared.
Jared Bowen. What Jared, we were at the event. Jared performed also at Band of
Jared.
Boston.
Yes, he was Elon Musk.
Jared
Did
walks
quite
up.
an imitation.
He was great. Jared walks up to me last night at the after party and he says, I really hope tomorrow you and Marjorie will allow me to do my imitation of Katharine Hepburn. So he is, that is so generous. How much does everybody want to hear him do Katharine Hepburn?
Yes.
Woo! Exactly.
I'll be Spencer Tracy.
He'll be doing about 30 minutes. So you can stick around
I'll
for
be
that
Spencer
or something?
Tracy.
Or, yeah, I heard you. Yeah.
I'll say it again. I'll be
Okay,
Spencer.
fine. Okay, fine.
Okay,
Sue Collins,
thank you very
wonderful to
much,
see you.
Sue
Let's
Collins.
It's
hear it for
Lesbian
Sue Collins.
Visibility Week. You're not going to recognize
right.
me. It's Lesbian Visibility Week.
We can see you.
Visibility Week. Yes.
Visibility.
Well,
See, this is why I
congratulations.
have to have Lesbian Visibility Week.
That's
they
right.
didn't even notice.
Exactly.
Okay, we see you over
I'm
there,
here
Sue.
all week.
And I tell you,
9
I
o'clock
think
show's the same as
the purple pantsuit. I think it's the right thing for Lesbian Visibility
There
Week.
you
I think
go.
you're making a
I'm gonna
statement
wave
right
a
there.
little flag.
Purple
Got that in.
pantsuit.
Thank you.
Wave a little flag.
Nice to see you.
We're speaking with Sue O'Connell, our media maven. Media maven Sue O'Connell is co-publisher of Bay News, the South End
Bay
News, contributor
Windows,
to current
Bay Windows.
Bay Windows. Whoops,
Thank
what
you.
did I say?
Bay News.
Oh,
It's good.
sorry.
She used
Bay
to call
Windows.
it gay windows. You know that. by
I
the
know
way.
she did it in print
Yeah.
once. I think she did it in the Herald in print. We were going to do it.
Anyway, contributed to Current on NBC, LX, and NECN. Thank you very much, media
Great to
maven
see you, Sue.
Sue O'Connell. Up next, we're going to talk to Michael Curry. We're going to talk to him about this incredible case that we all heard about the veterans dying at the Holyoke Soldiers' Home. Well, the SJC has now reinstated criminal charges against some of the officials there, the high-ranking officials. So we're going to talk to him about that and a lot more. You're listening to Boston.
That story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Comcast. Through Project UP, Comcast is committing $1 billion to help provide people with the skills, resources, and opportunities they need to succeed in a digital world. Learn more at comcast.com/projectup. And the Museum of Science, now reopened to the public with their newest exhibit, Arctic Adventure, Exploring with Technology. You can book tickets and plan your visit today at mos.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. Before we introduce our next guest, we want to remind you we have a special BPR event, an after-hours event, next Tuesday, May 2nd. We've never done this before. We're going to do a taping of an interview with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She'll be with us the whole hour. You can ask her questions if you're here. Plus, we have a live performance by the unbelievable kids from the Boston Arts Academy Spirituals Ensemble. As I said, we heard them sing for the first time at Mel King's funeral, and they were otherworldly great. It will be here at the library next Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. We'll be here during the day as usual, but we'll also be back at 6. There's beer and wine and finger food, free and open to the public. However, because it's after hours, you do have to RSVP or you cannot come. So please go to gbhnews.org, /BPR. We're joined now by Michael Curry, President and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers. Michael is also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors. He chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. Hello, Michael Curry.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, Michael Curry.
Good to
Thank
have
you
you.
very much for coming in. So let's start out with something that's some good news. Jim and I were lucky enough to get the day off to go to the great Mel King's memorial, his funeral service in the South End, and it was a really impressive day. And people talked about his involvement in education, mentoring these kids, and you know, he was 94, I believe, when he passed away.
And some of the kids he mentored spoke, which was just great.
It was
Phenomenal.
it was a really impressive, because I didn't know a lot of that stuff about Mel King. Anyway, Boston has renamed a school after him, so that's pretty nice. Did we talk to you about Mel King before? I think we did,
We
didn't
talked briefly about it, but I don't know if we talked since the service.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Well, since the service, you might ask, what was it, Reverend Culpepper?
Oh,
tell the story about Reverend Culpepper.
So Reverend Culpepper is talking about how Mel King was always saying, like 30, 40 years ago, back when I was first in Boston, let's go over to Carson Beach. And that's in South Boston, where really, if you were black, you couldn't go to South Boston if you weren't ready to get. And Culpepper says, you know, very honestly, he says, you know, I really didn't want to go, because I go over there, I get hit with rocks, people are calling me names. I just didn't want to go get beat up and put my life on the line, as it were. And so when someone was talking about renaming, I think it was Columbus Avenue, Mel King Avenue, Culpepper says, I think we should name Carson Beach Mel King Beach, which I think would be sort of wonderful.
Didn't he turn to the governor, I think, and the mayor when he said that, to say, basically, make that happen?
And they were on the stage.
Yeah. So I think that would be a poetic justice. What do you think?
Yeah, well, one is just the history of that is that the Boston NAACP was part of that protest to bring people to integrate that beach. Yeah. So Attorney Joe Feaster was a part of that. I think he was president at the time. So Culpepper was right. Mel King was an architect of a lot of the progress that we've had in this city. And that service was moving. You know, I think many of us were brought to tears often.
Yeah.
The music was amazing.
Amazing.
Arroyo, the young Arroyo was phenomenal. It's just so many memories I have. And having been a young 20-something-year-old, sitting in the community, being an activist and listening and learning from him, what I take from that service is, what have you done?
Yeah.
What have you contributed? What lives did you change? And I think we all have to take his model and approach the rest of our lives.
You know, talk about spending a life committed to what you care about. You mentioned Joe Feaster. He was on our show about a month ago because he was just appointed by Mayor Wu as the co-chair of the city's reparations committee.
Yeah.
So he's still...
And there was just an incident in Carson Beach not that many months ago where a bunch of black kids were over there, and there was a lot of pushback to those kids being there. South Boston still remains very white.
And I'll say this about Boston. So if you've been born and raised in Boston, and my mother moved here for the warmth of other suns, like Isabel Wilkinson's book from Alabama.
Yeah.
So I'm born in Boston City Hospital, raised here. There was a lot of parts of Boston that we couldn't go to. It wasn't just Carson Beach. We didn't feel comfortable in Copley Square, Cleveland Circle, some parts of Dorchester. You knew that if you went there, it was unsafe.
Yeah.
You were unwelcome, and whether it was the store clerk or the gas station superintendent or the pedestrian walking down the street, this was not a welcoming city, even in my generation, through much of my lifetime. So Carson Beach is just a sample, an example of how unreceptive this city has been to folks who were born and raised here, generationally. And black and brown folks.
You know, Michael Curry, can we stay on here? You obviously, as people listen to you on our show, know that you are an historian in addition to the 14 other things you do. We read a piece this morning. We got Harry Belafonte, talk about legendary and someone in their 90s. Harry Belafonte, I knew sort of in the vaguest of terms about his deep involvement in the civil rights movement, his commitment to activism, even above his art. He did a wonderful interview with Jared, which we're going to talk to him about in a little bit. What I didn't know is about their first encounter. Apparently, it was right after Rosa Parks did what Rosa Parks did. Belafonte apparently, I don't know if it's apocryphal or real, picks up the phone. A voice comes on that he recognizes immediately and said, "Hi, you don't know me, but I'm Martin Luther King Jr." And Belafonte says, "Believe me, I know you." Tell us a little bit about their history and how influential Belafonte was on the work of Reverend King.
Well, if I could sing well, I'd start with Deo.
Very good, Michael.
Yeah, it didn't sound good. Trust me, I'm not a singer. I was a singer in before my puberty kicked in.
You did?
And Ebenezer Baptist Church, but that changed.
Whoa.
Oh yeah, when your voice changed.
His voice changed.
Yeah, that was the end of that.
That was the end of that. You know, it's interesting. Harry Belafonte, for many of us who grew up watching television and not seeing ourselves reflected in television, even as I was a 1960s kid, 70s, we were proud of Harry Belafonte because, of course, the roles that he played were courageous roles. They were roles that actually could ruin your career. He made political statements through his roles. And you know, 1950s, 1960s were hard times to be in film. I think about filmmakers like Oscar Micheaux. If no one ever knows who Oscar Micheaux is, one of the first black filmmakers, and how hard it was for filmmakers and actors through much of this country's history to tell their story, to have their perspective. And there's that one example where Harry Belafonte is in a series and a white woman touches him. And they basically wanted to retake the scene because you couldn't have a white woman touching a black man, right?
Wow.
So it tells you about this country's history, and I think the interaction between he and Dr. King was bound to happen. He was an actor and an activist musician who then met the King and decided that he would walk away from his acting career, his music career, and become an activist, marching with King, funding the movement, Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee, SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Council. There was a lot of stuff that he decided to do. And I think, again, the message in this for all of us is, are you willing to take the risk to sacrifice your career to stand up and speak for what's right and do what's right? Harry Belafonte is a model American that, quite frankly, black folks don't own him alone. Americans should own him as a great example of what you do when courage doesn't skip a generation.
You know, one of the things, I'm sorry,
I was just going to ask you, do you think he paid a price in his career?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, as you see that transition between Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier, who is, again, another accomplished, phenomenal actor, Sidney Poitier was much more well received than Harry Belafonte. So there's some dynamics of race in that. But the reality,
he was less political?
Less political. I mean, you know, again, I always think about a kid. One of my favorite films was Uptown Saturday Night.
Yeah.
We didn't see ourselves on TV, so you had Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, Bill Cosby, joking, telling stories, doing mafia movies, like with the comedy. We didn't see that much when we were kids. I think that his career could have been much more successful if he had chosen not to be an activist. So again, sacrifice and service.
Yeah.
You know,
and you think of that famous Sidney Poitier movie too, that Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Yes.
And there he is. He's got the suit on all the time, and he's got this great speaking voice. I mean, it was like this is the upscale black guy.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And more acceptable.
The thing that I took away from one of the stories, you know, the behind the scenes, I love these moments. And again, I hope it's true. I assume it is. Belafonte is telling an interviewer that whenever they became so close, when King would ever come to New York City, he'd stay at Belafonte's house. And he tells the story, not about their political discussions, but they'll be sitting in his living room, King sitting there with his shoes and socks off, and they're there singing along with Peter, Paul, and Mary and Leadbelly. And you just imagine the image of these two giants.
Yeah.
It's really...
And if you think about King's career, you know, I could just tell you as a small example of that, as a civil rights activist, former leader at NAACP, and on national board, the stress that this job, right, requires. I always jokingly say, I'm glad so many people are woke and others are waking up, but some of us are insomniacs. It's hard to not sleep. It's hard. So for Dr. King to have a hideaway, to be able to go to Harry Belafonte's house and just be himself and hang out is phenomenal. I have my hideaways, but I have a greater appreciation for what Dr. King found in folks like Harry Belafonte that just respected him, admired him, and contributed to the movement.
So let's come back to Massachusetts. When Maura Healey was Attorney General and spending once a month with us, and the early part of her governorship, we talked about a case she brought as Attorney General, criminal proceeding against the two leaders, and I use the term in a titular way only, of the Holyoke Soldiers Home, where nearly 80 or maybe more veterans died because of COVID, and I would argue mismanagement of the facility. She brought criminal charges against them. They were dismissed by a judge. They were reinstated yesterday by the state's highest court. I think it was a 5-2 vote. Not saying that we're convinced that there was criminality, but we're convinced that there's enough evidence that that issue should be determined by a court as opposed to by an individual judge who said there was not enough information. I'll tell you, I'm not going to prejudge it, even though it's one of the worst things that I've lived through in Massachusetts. The fact that the families of those people, many of whom I've interviewed, particularly on Greater Boston, will at least have an opportunity to have some accountability for the loss of somebody they love, to me, is a huge and important thing.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, as someone who's investigated even the murder of black children by law enforcement in that civil rights role, one of the things that always mattered to me is when families would say, we just want an opportunity for someone to be held accountable. Of
course.
Yeah.
Even if it result of the investigation or the prosecution is not in our favor, someone just needs to be held accountable. So I give credit to this to families who are advocating. I had the honor of serving on Andrea Campbell, now Attorney General Campbell's transition team. I chaired her health care and fair competition transition team, and I got to dig in a little bit around investigations and their process. One, super integrity, phenomenal staff under Maura Healey, and now super integrity and phenomenal staff under Andrea Campbell. They'll investigate this, they'll prosecute it, and if there is wanton and reckless actions and behavior, I hope they win in that case. But we want that case to be heard, and I'm proud. When we give our children to you, when we give our elders, our seniors to you, and we expect you to protect them, to guard them, to guide them, and you make decisions like combining units, dementia units during COVID, and they result in deaths, someone should be held accountable. And I think this is a step in the right direction.
Can I also make a recommendation? Because I think it's one of the most important things that's happened in the state in recent years. There was allegedly an independent investigation commissioned by the former governor, Baker, where he hired this lawyer, Mark Pearlstein. And with brilliant Globe reporting follow-up, it was clear to me as a consumer of it that Pearlstein cooked the books, to be honest, number one. Number two, that information about the impending crisis that proved to be a deadly one was known far higher, according to Globe reporting, in the Baker administration than they let on, trying to blame underlings, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. It's a really important thing, and long before a jury, assuming it gets the case, makes a decision, I'd really urge you to read the Globe's reporting on the facts of the case and the Mark Pearlstein, quote, independent report for the governor, because I think it's pretty clear, at least so far, justice has not been done.
And if I can make one additional commentary, because I got the comment from one of the family members, which is when you put people in charge, they should be qualified to lead these facilities. And unfortunately, we have here and across the country, people are often appointed to positions because of relationships or favor. Whatever that was here, we definitely didn't have the right people running the institution.
And that's clear also in the Globe reporting.
That it was a political appointing
right, as opposed to a health
Governor
and medical
Baker probably should not have made.
Probably not.
So Michael Curry, one of our colleagues, Craig Lamalt, has done a great piece looking into facilities that treat and help people with intellectual developmental disabilities. And a lot of these people apparently are out when it comes to getting into these day programs. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, we run into these situations where, whether it's resources, whether it's just a poor coordination of services, and I think we're running to that across systems generally, and this is happening here as well. It's concerning, and I've gotten calls on it as well. I just don't know, what the way forward is if we don't sit down together and figure out a strategy, but it's concerning to me as well.
Well, it's going to be linked, I would imagine, to not great salaries, not great working conditions.
All the tsunami
funding
of circumstances. Yeah. Funding, is resources, is pay.
And people that have an adult living with them or someone that needs these day services, they can't a lot of times go to work or even go to they can't leave their loved one alone, so they're really up the creek.
Absolutely.
It's not just the caregiver, which obviously matters a lot, meaning the family caregiver. When you read stories like we have read through the years, and you know much better than we do in your League of Community Health Centers hat, is the independence and joy this brings to people who don't have much independence, who don't have much joy. It's beautiful, actually, and necessary. And it is all about funding. So let's see what happens in these budgets here on Beacon Hill that are being...
Well, this is what my sister does. She works at Capabilities down the Cape, and I know the story. She tells me about people that have autism or they're developmentally delayed or whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's really heartwarming. And how during the pandemic, how they try to do Zoom classes, read stories on Zoom and stuff like that, how much it meant to these people. It was really... She's going to heaven for this.
And I got to give a shout out. There's an organization in Brockton called We Care 365. Yep. Nancy is the owner of that organization. She just does a model that I think is something we should all be looking at, which is if you're a family member and you want to take care of a loved one, but you have a job and you can't afford to do that, they will find a way to pay you to stay home and take care of your loved one, whether it's a person with a disability, an elder. It's a phenomenal model because people want to be able to stay home and provide that care, and then they'll provide you with some support around skills, how to do it in a cultural and effective medical way. I just think that there's a lot of innovation we don't invest in, and models like We Care 365 is
Well, may I ask you a question? I often wonder, because you read all these stories about how people can't afford to get into elder care or assisted living because they're so expensive, you have to be really loaded to afford that kind of thing. Do you think we're getting there now that the baby boomers are all, dropping like flies? That
This is coming from two baby boomers, I should
that's
say.
right.
Yes.
Our days are numbered. That there will be more pressure on government to make it possible for families to provide care in the house?
I think it will. I think what happens in policy is people drive policy, as much as it doesn't seem that. I mean, there's some policy that comes out of nowhere, but people drive policy. So as we decide that there are needs that we have, we start asking for that. We say, well, I want to be able to provide these services at home. I want reimbursement. I want the infrastructure that I can put in my home, like daycares, like home cares is a good example of that. I think that we're headed in that direction. The thing about policymakers is we shouldn't wait for policymakers shouldn't wait for people to force them to do it. They should get ahead of it and start thinking about policy now. I think that our legislature is chief among the legislatures in the country that are thinking outside the box. But we can do better.
Because it would be cheaper for the government than to end up paying for government money if you don't have any money. That's the government's paying you for being in a nursing facility.
I have
right?
a phrase that I use in the health equity space, and I'm going to leave you both with the Health Equity Compact and stuff that we've launched. But I always say pay now or pay greater later.
Yeah.
Right? So if you don't do it up front in a way that's cost efficient and makes sense, you're going to pay for it on the back end, and it's going to be more expensive.
We want to talk politics before you go, but since you brought this, we've talked about this Health Equity Compact a lot. Obviously, something happened. You wouldn't have brought it. Yeah. So give people an update on what the project is for those who haven't tuned in, and what are you giving us?
So here's what I'm so excited about. So one is the organization has become 70 people, 70 black and brown folks who run health systems, hospitals, teaching hospitals, community, pharmaceutical industry, health centers, philanthropy. Lee Pelton, who you've had on, and I was here with last time. 70 leaders of color who have a different sense of urgency around health equity. The fact that black and brown folks are dying at a higher rate of almost every disease we can name, living shorter lives, 5-10 years less. Dr. Ojikutu and the Boston Public Health Commission just held a forum here this week in the library. Phenomenal data around this health equity challenge. This group has a few things we're working on. One is we filed legislation, which we call an omnibus bill, to address health equity. And the legislators who filed it, credit to them for being heroes and sheroes in that. Two, we have a foundation report with the Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation that's going to give us the cost of inequity.
Yeah.
What's the business case? What is it costing Massachusetts to have black and brown folks living sicker and dying early of almost every disease? And that means higher premiums. That means the cost of the workforce. When we have a workforce crunch right now, when black and brown folks are calling in sick and dying at high rates. And then we have a mass ink poll we're doing. We're going to ask the community what they think about health disparities and health inequity. And then we're doing community meetings. We're going to New Bedford, Western Mass, North Shore, South Shore, community meetings, virtual, and we're asking the community to tell us what they're experiencing with our healthcare system and social determinants of health. It's never happened. There's no model of it in the country, and everyone's calling to say, hey, how can we do that in Missouri? How can we do that in California? It's a phenomenal thing.
Well, you may be a little bit more of a fan of the legislature than Marjorie and I, to be candid. So is this have a snowball's chance in hell of getting anywhere up there? I mean at least significant pieces of it to get this started.
So I say yes, because I'll tell you one thing. We go to communities and we say, we want you to be hashtag health equity voter. Mm-hmm. So when you talk to a legislator, you say, hey, I want pocketbook issues. I want to know if you are doing something about health equity issues. I think we have phenomenal leaders who've sponsored the bill. And then we have a growing number of legislators who are signing on and are interested in it, because there's no other issue more important than life and death. And if black folks can't live long, build wealth, raise their kids, live without trauma, have healthy foods, access to housing, all of these things that we've historically not had in Massachusetts across the country, then you have poor health outcomes. We have to do it now. And we led health reform in this country, Massachusetts. We like to be competitive. Let's lead in health equity too.
So what is this thing you're about to give us? And in addition to that, how do people who are not here, who are not about to be handed something, learn about this project?
So this is related to that, but it's a little different. So this Health Equity Institute is something I launched a year and a half ago. I decided we want to do research on health equity issues out of the health centers. And I said it was
out of your health centers.
Out of health centers.
Yeah.
I said it was an Etch-a-Sketch of an idea, if anybody remembers what Etch-a-Sketch is.
I do.
And
loved them.
I got Mass General Brigham gave us $1.5 million to seed the institute, the creation of the institute. The legislature, through the ARPA dollars, gave us $5 million. Wow. And we are on the brink of hiring the inaugural executive director. So we're calling it emancipatory research. That makes people feel really giddy when I say that. Not just research, not participatory research, which everybody's moving towards, but emancipatory, which means I'm not going to wait on you, academic center, to come and ask the question about my condition, my community. I'm going to look at my own data. I'm going to look at my own lived experience. I'm going to ask you to join me in figuring out what's wrong with our communities and our health outcomes. It's emancipatory, it's groundbreaking, and this is really the information about it.
In honor of you, we're not going to badmouth the legislature until Monday. But again, if people want to find out about this effort, is there a website for any of this stuff?
Yeah, so go to massleague.org, our website, so Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers, and then the Health Equity Compact. Just Google Health Equity Compact. We really want this to be a movement. MPHA, the Mass Public Health Association, Carlene Pavlos just voted, their board vote just voted last night to support this legislation. The movement's building, so I feel very excited about it.
Fair enough.
You know, one last thing, Michael, putting on your political hat, NAACP hat, there's been a lot of talk about how many Democrats, which is a lot of them, I think it's 70%, don't want Joe Biden.
No, it's not Democrats, 70% of the population.
70% of the population, but what's the percentage of Democrats?
It's the majority.
Do not want Joe Biden to run again. I wonder how NAACP feels about this. I wonder, you know, a lot of people thought Joe Biden was sunk until he went to South Carolina. Yeah. Congressman Clyburn gave him huge support. He walloped everybody in South Carolina. So what do you think about this? Should we be upset? Young voters particularly are upset about Joe Biden.
So it's interesting. If you look at American history, black folks have always made calculated risk on who to support.
Right.
And they weren't always the ideal candidates, right? I remember even Woodrow Wilson was supported by black folks until he got into the office in segregated offices. Right, so he actually reneged on the promises he made as he ran for his campaign.
Didn't know that.
I say that to say, Biden's a good guy. I think all indications by everyone, including President Obama, who we love and revere, and his record speaks for itself. I think there are concerns among black folks about whether he's the right president, but I think they also understand if you want to do something about voting rights and criminal justice reform and education inequities, if you want to do something about health disparities, Biden is the one that is likely to lead you to those changes. And if it is Donald Trump, we'll lose ground, as we did in the last few years. And I think, you know, NAACP is nonpartisan. Our job is really just to turn people out and vote, to make sure that particularly black and brown folks show up, and then you vote your interests, and the right person will be in office. But what happens is people rely on us not showing up.
Yeah.
Right? So they say your vote doesn't count, or it doesn't matter, or they trick you with these campaigns that make you think that voting really doesn't make a difference. The reality is we have to tell them, we have to counter that, and we do it across the country.
What do you mean they rely on you not showing up? If it had not been for blacks, particularly black women,
yes,
Joe Biden wouldn't be president of the United States. So what do you mean they count on you not showing up?
So one is we have most people in this country, or too many people in this country, don't exercise the franchise of voting. Okay. Right. So just keep in mind that people don't vote enough, period.
Right.
But when you think about black and brown folks who've been disappointed, disenfranchised, bamboozled, as Malcolm X said, and we've been invited to come to the table to participate. If you're not at the table, you're on the table, you're on the menu, and we show up to vote, and then you don't deliver on the things you told us. You don't solve our murders.
Yeah.
You don't give us jobs. You don't help get us academic rigor and quality schools. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or independent or libertarian or independent, whatever you are, you disappoint us, and then I don't even participate in the process.
Yeah.
That's shame on everybody. Because the reality is we need to make sure that a rising tide is lifting all boats, and that means investing in communities that are disparately impacted by all these things we're talking about. We've not done that well in this country. And black folks we protest by not coming. But we have to say to them, no, you actually need to show up because you lose even more when you don't.
On that note, Michael Curry, as always, love talking to you. Thanks so much for your time. Michael Curry.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michael Curry. We have been speaking with Michael Curry, who's on the National Board of the NAACP. He's also the CEO of Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers right here in Boston. I guess are you located in Boston? Is your office in Boston? It must be in Boston, isn't it? I don't know where it is. Anyway, he runs the whole thing. After a quick break, we're going to be talking to, I'm totally confused, Jim. Where are we going? Oh, Jared Bowen is next. Yeah, Jared Bowen actually had open studio. Well, I got confused because we switched around our.
I got it fine.
Anyway,
look
Jared
at him. He's
Bowen,
right there walking towards us. That's a good indication.
He actually had
he's about to be on.
Harry Belafonte in open studio. We're going to talk to Jared about that and a bunch of other art news. Jared Bowen is next. He's executive arts editor here at GBH. You're listening to GBH, Boston Public Radio 89.7, broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library.
They always want to promote the negative things that happen in our community.
Right.
But when the good things happen, there's no media.
We're changing that. It's really important that we correct for that bad news bias, which is built into the way that we report news. There are amazing stories of inspiration in all lines.
Doing good work in the community, it's news worth sharing. The Joy Beat with Arun Roth, Fridays on GBH's All Things Considered.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And Direct Tire and Auto Service, committed to helping Boston drivers since 1974, performing regular maintenance to help improve performance and gas mileage. Direct Tire and Auto Service, not just service, customer service.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. In about 20 minutes, the great Patty Larkin is going to sing and for us and talk with us. But first, we're joined by GBH's Executive Arts Editor, Jared Bowen. Jared is host of Open Studio with Jared Bowen. Well, that's fairly obvious. Which you can catch Friday nights right here on GBH2. And last night in Band in Boston, he was Elon Musk, and you were spectacular. Congratulations.
Yeah, you did really a good job.
Nice to see you,
Musk.
Jared.
So, Jared Bowen, we were just talking with Michael Curry, who's on the National Board of the NAACP, about Harry Belafonte in terms of his impact in the civil rights community. You had a great chance to interview him on your show, Friday nights at 8:30, Open Studio. And we wanted, before we asked you about Harry Belafonte, play a little clip from that interview. Here it is.
But I often remark that my whole relationship with the arts was really based upon my sense of active engagement in our community. And I just made it my mission to, if I ever had the opportunity and the power to change the way in which we experienced life, that I would do everything I could to make a difference.
Now, he died at age 96. He sounds like he was elderly when you interviewed him, but tell us about the interview and what you thought.
Well, first of all, he was just such an incredibly generous and kind and brilliant man, still, even at that age, very much all about activism and keeping the momentum of the movement going forward. The crux of our interview was really about him, as he described himself, an activist before an artist, that it was his intention always to move the movement forward. And it came to him very early. He didn't necessarily grow up with theater, but he, at a very young age in New York, he went into a theater in New York where he saw Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee and Sidney Poitier. And right there in that theater, he saw what these actors were doing. And Michael Curry was just talking about this, that they were presenting stories. They were activists. They were advocating again, for the civil rights movement that was to come. And so that changed his whole trajectory. Then he went into school later with B. Arthur, Walter Matthau, Brando, I mean, this extraordinary class of actors, but he always kept that front and center. And then he found this extraordinary success through singing. He had the first $1 million selling album right before Elvis Presley, and he used that money to support Martin Luther King and to support all of the coalitions and the movements going forward. And then that was always top of mind for him, so that later in life, he would then criticize some of the Black and African-American performers, more contemporary performers like Beyonce, for not doing more. Because his contention was the arts are everywhere in your life.
Yeah.
Everything you look at, everything you enjoy, everything you read, everything you see. So for that, you have a great responsibility to be a leader. And he wanted to see that in the successive generations.
By the way, you can watch that interview. I watched this morning. And by the way, talk about amazing shows you had. I'm watching you set up who's going to be on the show, and this face appears of a guy who we now know as Logan Roy, but no one ever heard of.
That's right.
Shakespearean actors knew him then.
You had him
Brian
first.
Cox and Belafonte on the same show.
Yeah.
That was pretty incredible. But the interview with Belafonte was great. You should check it out, everybody. I'm sorry, what?
I was going to say, the funniest thing, we had Brian Cox on around the time that he was playing Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
And do you know, one of the funniest takeaways from that, I asked him what his inspiration for playing Churchill was, and part of it was based on Stewie from Family Guy.
Oh my God.
That cartoon character, because he thought Stewie gets all worked up and angry, and so he saw that in Churchill.
So you had, speaking of your Friday night 8:30 open studio show, you had another great interview with Governor Healy, talking about what she would like to see happen in terms of arts and culture in the state. Here's a little bit of that interview.
Record investments proposed for Mass Cultural Council. We also proposed some tax credits, relief for those who were engaged in movie production in the state, and also pre-Broadway, post-Broadway production. The idea will be provide some live theater tax credits to both attract more people and talent to Massachusetts and help those who are in the business. $3 million in a fund just for our independent movie theaters to help them buy new screens.
So how is she compared to Baker? Better, worse, same? What's the deal?
She's the first governor that I've heard actively talk about the arts. So we reached out to interview her. I had a sense in my conversations with her in the past. In fact, shortly after she became Attorney General, I remember we had our first conversation about her interest in the arts. And so I wanted to sit down with her, which we did about a week or two ago, to talk about who she is as an arts person, but also where she expects to take the state, so we can lay the groundwork for what to expect. So I think it's interesting to note that when she was playing basketball in Europe, she lived in Salzburg, so she was surrounded by culture, birthplace of Mozart, and great museums, so she was able to travel and absorb there. But she said it started even earlier, growing up in a family that was in the auction business, so dealing with antiquities and being surrounded in art in that regard. Then we know that she brought Brandi Carlile into her inauguration, so she likes live music. She's already attended a few shows. She told me 6, Into the Woods, Hamilton. It'll be up to the nonprofit theaters to remind her that they exist too, so it's not just necessarily the Broadway theaters. But she really recognizes that Massachusetts lags in its support of the arts financially among other states in this country. So right now she's on track to give the biggest investment to the Massachusetts Cultural Council that it's seen since the late 1980s.
Wow.
This is an 11% increase, $25 million. It's already been approved by the House. They're waiting for it in the Senate, so they fully expect that it'll go forward. What isn't so successful at the moment is the live theater tax credit that she was talking about. And for people who don't know what that is, this is an incentive to create theater here, whether it's new shows or nationally touring shows. And that's very significant because when you bring in a show when you originate a show that's here, like Moulin Rouge, or we've seen Across the River at the American Repertory Theater, Porgy and Bess and Pippin and other shows that have gone on, you bring an entire team in that sits down for a while, so that it's all of those jobs that are created in the months that it takes to create a show. Then they have a longer run, especially if they're going to Broadway, because this turns us into a tryout town. So you have audiences coming for hopefully at least a couple of months, audiences who drive into the venues and they park near the venues and they eat at restaurants near the venues and hopefully shop near the venues, and not to mention all of the jobs that it creates. So right now that wasn't included in the House's version of the budget. It still has a chance, I'm told, though, through the governor's own economic development plan or as a standalone bill. But this is something she's really really focused on. I did ask her if there will be a cabinet position devoted to the arts, as we've seen in the city of Boston. She said, we'll wait and see on that. But she is somebody who's paid a lot of attention to what this region needs.
You know, speaking of investment in the arts, you and I, based on your recommendation, as I said when I was in Florida a couple of weeks ago, what's the name of the place I went to with all the murals? What's it called?
Wynwood,
which is just this outdoor museum of murals. The city of Boston is putting their money where their mouth is on the mural front, which is really exciting to me. What's happening?
Yeah, so the city has awarded a $3.5 million public art contract to this group from Brooklyn, New York. It's called Street Theory. And the plan is that they will come in and put artists to work, curate mural artists to create about 15 murals throughout the city of Boston. So they'll provide the resources, they'll help site locations, and again, they'll find the artists. They've already done this in a few neighborhoods like Roxbury and the Malcolm X Park and a community center there. So again, we're seeing heavy investment. I think what leaders are beginning to recognize, and it's befuddled me why people haven't seen this before, the arts are a at least before the pandemic, they were a $2.2 billion annual industry, $100 million generated in taxes every year, and 70-something thousand jobs created through the arts. This is an economic engine that needs to be leveraged, and I think that people are figuring this out. One thing I want to go back to with the governor in terms of figuring out how to put people to work too and be inclusive is she wants to see more artists folded into state government. What does that mean? Whether it's they're represented on state house walls through artwork or whether they're brought into agencies. So if you're talking about infrastructure, how does an artist come into that? If you're talking about transportation and bridges. So I think we're going to see the arts literally embedded in more projects going forward.
Speaking of embedded, is that, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, is marquetry is the word?
Yes.
That's sort of embedded art,
It is embedded,
isn't it?
yeah.
Can you describe it? I never heard of it till this morning.
So marquetry, if you look at an old mahogany sideboard or something and you see a design in it and you realize there are different shades of wood, that's marquetry. You're layering in these different wood veneers. So there's an artist right now at the Addison Gallery of American Art, which I always love to say is free. So if you go visit it, it's free, as I would like all museums to be.
It's in Andover, right?
It's in Andover.
Yeah.
Her name is Allison Elizabeth Taylor, and this is her first major retrospective, and it's called The Sum of It. And so we see decades of her work where really she's making these paintings. She calls them paintings, but they're wood veneers. And so when you think about what she has to do, she started by going to the 99-cent store and getting contact paper and cutting it up and making these little images so that she creates these scenes. She's somebody who has spent a lot of time in New York, where she lives now, and grew up in Nevada. And so you see these beautiful images of trees and sunsets, but you also see human folly and despair. As Alison Kemmerer, the director of the museum, the curator of this show, said to me, there's a lot of push and pull here. Humans and nature, people marginalized, but people also in excess, because if you're in Nevada and you're looking at Las Vegas, there are big showgirls, there's money, but there are also people just sitting at the slot machine, or people you can tell in their circumstances where they're living that they're not having the best life. And so we see these series of portraits and landscapes. She won the Outwin Prize by the Smithsonian for this really, really captivating piece that she created during the pandemic when a guy in her neighborhood who couldn't cut hair indoors went outside and did it out on the street and brought this beautiful gilt mirror, it looks like, and set it up, and she created this whole rendition.
No, it's even better than that. He's cutting hair outside. It starts raining or something, so he brings his operation under the Williamsburg Bridge, hangs the mirror from a fence under the Williamsburg, and becomes such a thing that he's essentially cutting hair like 12 hours a day.
And there's so much emotion that you think wood. How can that come from wood? But it's all in the shading, and sometimes she uses as many as 100 pieces of wood from all over the world.
Sounds fabulous.
Also, there's some male nudity in this show because she decided to take the gaze back and then project it on to men. So she's telling stories
run that by
here
me
too.
one more time. She's
taking the male gaze back, and so it becomes a female gaze,
right.
and then projecting it forward.
We have one too, that gaze.
Do you have that gaze?
I think so.
What are you
Maybe
talking
not
about?
as much as men.
Well,
Oh, we do. You mean as in
women have a male
do,
gaze, but I think that probably the predominant
fine.
thing is more the
I got
male
it
gaze.
now.
I have an out-of-school question. In other words, we didn't plan on talking to you about this today, but just quickly, I wondered. Peter Lynch was in here the other day, famed investor, philanthropist, Fidelity, Magellan Fund, and all that kind of stuff. He's donated a bunch of art to the Boston College Museum, including a Mary Cassatt painting, and people may know she's the one that does all the mothers and children, one of the first artists that really did those mother and child kind of things and became famous for it, except for the religious art. So that must be quite a museum up there. I've never been there.
Oh, the Boston College Museum,
Yes.
the McMullen Museum of Art
Yes.
is a great museum, and they curate fantastic shows, and always branching out in different directions too. Whether it's, I think the last time we talked about it was the photographer from Chelsea, from the
Yep.
Chelsea Record.
Yep.
They're curated. This is what happens when you have a smaller museum or a university museum. You have the freedom to experiment because you're not necessarily relying on the gate, as they say, for huge admissions. So you can do shows that you think are meaningful or that your students will learn from. And so there's a lot more opportunity. Also, if you donate to a museum like that, as opposed to a big encyclopedic museum, there's more opportunity to have your work shown because it's not going to sit in storage for as long.
And also, that's where the Cardinal used to live. I mean, the museum is now in the Cardinal's old residence, Cardinal Law's old residence, because Sean O'Malley moved to the South End. Very impressive by a lot of our standards. But anyway, that's where it is.
I remember sitting in those rooms when the Cardinal first came out and started to acknowledge the sexual abuse crisis that was emerging.
That's right. So tell us about this Apollinaire's Dance Nation.
Yeah, this is really interesting because going back to being women or not being women, I was never a 13-year-old girl, but after seeing this show, Dance Nation, I think I have a much clearer understanding of what it must be like to be a 13-year-old girl, because Dance Nation is a piece that takes us to this very intense theater dance troupe. They're all 13 years old, and they have Pat, the dance teacher, who is extremely invigorating and wants them, basically dance is the be-all, end-all. And you kind of settle into this piece, which is part surrealism, part comedy, but also very, very sincere, very dramatic. And you realize how big life is when you're 13 years old.
Yeah.
The stakes are huge for everything. And so much of you is just seeking affirmation either from your teachers or your friends or from your parents. And every folly seems epic, and how will you recover from this? And so we see these characters portrayed by adult actors, which kind of gives us this lens. If we were to consider our 13-year-old selves at each of our respective ages, makes it even more poignant, I think. But when the stakes are high, that you just want to get to the dance national competition in Tampa, and you'll do anything to get there, and what happens when you don't, it becomes a pretty extraordinary moment. Also, when you're dealing with other 13-year-old girl things like losing your virginity and your period and objectification, and so it all comes to the fore in this very clever play that actually was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize.
Explain to me why there are adult actors playing the part of the teens.
It was a choice of the playwright, and
but why? You know?
Well, probably because especially if you're doing it in professional theater, you want seasoned actors to portray these characters.
I thought there was more even a meaning that was ascribed to it, but maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Well, I think, again, it's that because you're trying to create this juxtaposition, because it's a wide range of ages in the actors who are playing these girls. And by the way, it's at Apollinaire Theater in Chelsea that we were just talking about.
Okay, I want to play a little sound from you. This is from one of the great movies of all time. It's from 1951. It is, of course, The African Queen. Here it is.
I never dreamed that any mere physical experience could be so stimulating. I've only known such excitement a few times before. A few times in my dear brother's sermons when the Spirit was really upon him.
I'm sorry, I can't remember. Who is that actor? Who is that again?
I've never heard of her.
Katharine Hepburn. Now, we have heard, how long have we known you?
A long time.
A long time. We have heard that you do a killer Katharine Hepburn imitation. And I decided yesterday I was going to put my foot down. Enough of this crap. I'm not going to do it today. I'm not going to do it today. It's been like 20 years. Take it away.
No. First of all, you were eavesdropping on a conversation I was having last night.
I was.
With Tiffany Faison and that gentleman from
restaurateur.
Bully Boy Distillery.
Yes.
Because I was saying how...
Okay, well, that's not the issue. What are you doing?
I'm trying to stall here.
Okay, go ahead. Do like a minute. You only have to do a minute. Go ahead.
Wait, what if I do 10 seconds?
Would you do 10 seconds?
We'll take it.
Okay.
We'll take it. We'll take it. We're
Does
ready.
anybody want to hear him do Katharine Hepburn?
Yes.
I had a feeling.
This is awful.
There's one person in the back who doesn't, so we'll do it. Go ahead. Okay. Here it is. Let me set it up. Here is Jared Bowen from Open Studios and all the other stuff doing the great Katharine Hepburn. Take it away.
Like calla lilies are in bloom again.
Oh, well, that was not even 3 seconds.
That's great.
Okay, that was a little bit more, and then you're off the hook.
No, we are done.
You've You've got it down.
That
you
was
got the
actually
little
pretty good.
vibrato
That
in your
was actually-
voice perfectly down, because she did talk.
beautiful.
Why did she talk like that? There was something toward the end of her life, I think,
Yeah,
that she was battling some kind of, did she have Parkinson's or something?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I worship Katharine Hepburn, by the way.
Yeah, one of the
What
best.
an extraordinary person.
By the way, speaking of Hepburn, didn't you on NECN, when you were at NECN on the Century ago, spend an hour with Audrey Hepburn?
I did.
What was that? I mean, was that
Oh my
unbelievable?
God! It was like it was hysterical. I didn't know I had no idea what I was doing. Then this is the beginning of my broadcast career, and I had Audrey Hepburn for an entire hour.
Oh my
The
God.
two of us. I think she was pretty appalled about 15 minutes into the whole thing, but she
I
stayed
doubt
nonetheless. She did a lot of work for children's charities. And,
Is that why she was there?
healthcare. Yeah, she was promoting that. But of course, I had to ask her about Breakfast at Tiffany's and all the great movies she made, and she looked beautiful. I mean, she was just very elegant.
Yes.
Okay, you finally passed the test. It's not enough, but it's a good start. What are you doing Friday night? Oh, today's Friday. What are you doing tonight?
Tonight we're looking at, this is the 50th anniversary at hip hop, so we're looking at back at a few of the hip hop stories I've told over the years, from Basquiat to Hype Man, a great play that was presented here, and Freestyle Love Supreme, the comedy show that fuses musical theater and comedy and hip hop, all with one of the creators was Lin-Manuel Miranda, so we'll look at those tonight.
Jared, you were fabulous, particularly as Katharine Hepburn.
That was
It's
beautiful.
good to see you.
The color lilies are in bloom.
Let's hear it for Jared Bowen. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you very much, Jared Bowen. Jared Bowen is GBH Executive Arts Editor, host of Open Studio with Jared Bowen, which you can catch Friday nights right here on GBH2 at 8:30. And if you want to see all the artwork that you may not actually get to see go to in person, you got to watch
the
Open
show.
Studio at
I'm with
8:30,
you.
because it's like you're being there. Anyway, we're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7. Up next, time for Live Music Friday. This week we're joined by the fantastic singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, ahead of a show she's putting on Saturday night in Lexington. We're going to hear her sing right here at the Boston Public Library, streaming live on GBH2, at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com.
Poet Camille Dungy has transformed her suburban Colorado garden into a pollinator paradise. In her new memoir, she explains how it sprouted questions of race, family, and the planet.
It's a very different set of questions for how to build a sustainable world if I think about it from my house.
That story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And M&M Skylights, offering a wide range of Velux skylight products, installation, and maintenance services to customers from Boston to Portland and surrounding areas. More information at mmskylights.com. And LabShares Newton, working to support our biotech ecosystem by providing both short and long-term memberships that include BL2 suites, benches, shared equipment, and more. Further information is available at labshares.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie. Again, we're streaming live, or at the library. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. It is time for Live Music Friday. This week, I am really beyond thrilled. We're joined by the fantastic singer-songwriter, Patty Larkin. Patty's got a show tomorrow, Saturday, April 29th. At the Maxwell Auditorium at the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library in Lexington. You can get tickets, and you should, at pattylarkin.com. I'm thrilled to have you here. How are you, Patty? Great to see you.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
You have a lot of fans here and all over the place, but I'm fascinated by your latest project, Bird and Cage, and what you're doing with this album. I mean, explain to people about what this is.
Well, it's a collection of 10 poets' work that I set to music, and it started with a Kay Ryan poem. I was reading one of her books, and I had my guitar in my lap in a hotel, and I kind of was hoping to jumpstart a song, as we all try to do as songwriters. And I just started singing the last poem in the book, Green Behind the Ears. And so I did that, and then got inspired to do more poems. I was teaching at the Fine Arts Work Center. I was teaching lyric writing and meeting people like Marie Howe, Nick Flynn, Natalie Diaz, Robert Pinsky, and I was just stunned by how breathless and fearless their work is. I mean, they do run on sentences. They don't think about cadences in terms of length of a stanza or a musical phrase, and so that was a challenge for me, is to not change the words but to put music to it.
But I was thinking when I was learning about A Bird in a Cage, how people talk about Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, these great lyricists that have these great lyrics. Even Bruce Springsteen, I suppose people say, is a great lyricist. But it seems that you camp on something that, in retrospect, seems pretty obvious. Put these incredible poems to music. But I think you're the first person I know of that's done it.
Oh, I know. I Googled it, and I'm not alone.
You're not alone? Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
A lot of the rock stars have found it as well. But no, it was so inspiring to do, and so much fun to do. And I just would sit with the book of someone's work and just keep turning the page until something clicked, So it was fun.
And by the way, didn't Richard Blanco, who's a monthly guest with us, who is, of course, an inaugural poet for Barack Obama. It's National Poetry Month, right?
Yes, it is.
It is National Poetry Month. How have you, by the way, Streets in the Light, what was the name of the first? Streets in the Light, was that the name of the first, Patty Larkin?
Oh, Step Into the Light.
Step Into the Light, I'm sorry.
Or Schlep Into the Light.
Schlep Into the Light. How are you different as a performer a couple of decades in there, Patty Larkin, do you think?
Well, it's interesting to think about. That album was a lot of songs I had sung in a band, also the Patty Larkin Band. And so you can tell in my singing, the way I'm singing, it's just more of a, not in your face, but it's just a more strident vocal. And coming, from more of a Bruce Springsteen aspect, if I would compliment myself on that. But,
how important is live music for you? Playing to an audience as opposed to recording?
It's huge
for
me.
Why?
It's why I write, which I discovered during the pandemic. I write to see what I'm thinking and to create something new and hear something new, but then I want to share it and see what the reaction is. I'm a performing artist.
Do you live on the Cape?
I do.
You're doing Pam
yes.
later in the summer, North Shore, one of the great venues ever on the Cape.
It is really cool.
Do you mind if I ask you where you live on the Cape, or you not want to say?
I live in Wellfleet.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's Jim's summer hangout.
I know.
Wait, but aren't you an Iowa kid, or aren't you from the Midwest or some such thing?
Yes.
So how'd that happen?
How much time do you have?
As much as you need.
No, I grew up in Wisconsin. I was born in Iowa. We left when I was 2, so I don't remember much of it.
Okay.
But I went to college and didn't really think about a career plan. I was an English major at the U of O, and my sister was having their first kid here in Boston, and I moved out for a few months to stay until Megan was born, and that was, decades ago. Went to Berklee College of Music briefly, and also studied jazz. And there were so many different kinds of music happening. Played street music with an Irish Celtic band, and I find it very inspiring to just be here.
It's the voice of Patty Larkin,
singer-songwriter. So tell us your connection to these healing gardens.
Well, I suffered a fall in June last year, and was in rehab hospitals, 2 Spalding hospitals, one in Brighton, one in Sandwich. And the most important thing for me was to get outside and to go work in the garden. I was a member of the garden club, and I had a hat and everything. And I wasn't very good at it at the time.
Wait a minute. You were the member of the garden club in Wellfleet, or
Spalding.
The Spalding has a garden club. I did not know that.
Oh yeah, it's
okay.
I was told, I was handed a spade and told to go weed, and I was in a wheelchair at the time, and my hands didn't work very well at the time, and I was useless. But the second time out, I actually was able to pluck a clover from beneath the zucchini. I'm being facetious, but this is, Mary Egan passed away 20 years ago, and in her memory, she asked that a garden be built for the kids at the Waltham Children's Hospital, Boston Children's Hospital at Waltham. And so it's a place where the kids can go as patients, the parents, the friends, and family members can go and just sit outside, because you're in an enclosed space for so long. So I found it.
Do you remember the huge conflict
about Children's Hospital?
There was the tree in Children's Hospital.
There was the tree.
Was it going to be cut down?
Well, it was.
I know.
Unfortunately, there was this on the grounds of Children's Hospital. This beautiful inner space that they ended up bulldozing to put in a new building.
I'm sorry.
They did put a park inside the building, I think on one of the upper floors or something like that, so there is an outdoor space. But I remember having patients parents come on and talk about what
how much it meant to their kid.
Yeah, when they were sick, dealing with cancer or whatever they were dealing with, to be able to go out and hang up by the tree and the grass and the flowers
outside.
Yeah, nature is so healing to people.
I agree.
Yeah, so we have a picture right here of this. Did you mention the Children's Hospital of Boston at Waltham? So is this Terry Egan, the husband of the wife who died? Is he doing this all?
He is. That's his passion. That's his life's work.
They're beautiful. I mean, the pictures of the healing gardens are absolutely gorgeous.
So what are you
a good gardener now?
Forget gardener. I want to hear you sing. We're talking about gardener in a few minutes.
Okay.
Is that okay or is that not okay? Are you a good gardener? Answer the question.
No,
she said
not
no. She said no.
Is that the end of that?
She learned nothing with the spade at Spalding Hospital.
I eat vegetables.
Okay, there you go.
Well, that's actually fine. It's the other end of the thing, but it's fine. I am thrilled. We're all thrilled to have you play here. What are you playing?
I'm going to play "Who Holds Your Hand." It's from an album that came out in the early '90s. So,
great.
Yeah.
Patty Larkin. You can gently put that headset on the ground there. And again, if you want to get tickets, Saturday night, April 29th, at the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library, Maxwell Auditorium. It's in Lexington, Massachusetts. And you go to Patty Larkin. Am I right about this? Yes, you go to pattylarkin.com. I actually remember listening, and when I mentioned the name of her first CD, I guess it was an album then in those days, I remember buying it actually, and I really, and I don't even know if I've ever even met Patty, but I've seen her perform, and I'm really thrilled, and she's about to do that very thing, sitting just a few feet away from us. Here she is, Patty Larkin.
Can't blame it on the moon no more, no. Can't blame it on the radar weather. Can't blame it on my lucky stars, my mother or my father. I'm holed up in the bell tower, looking for 4 walls to bounce off, looking for a donkey I could maybe pin a tail on, yeah. Yes. Well, I've taken to staying up late, taking up bowling, take a couple aspirin and I call my lover in the morning, and I've taken to talking to myself. I don't even get it. Gotta get out of my head. It'll drive me crazy if I let it. Yeah. Who holds your hand when you're alone? Who holds your hand when you're alone? So I put a cup of tea on and I looked at Rand McNally. That's a map, by the way. Put a couple shoes on and I hurried down the alley. Now I'm driving down the highway, trying to get the lead out. I'm rolling down the window, sticking my neck out. Who holds your hand when you're alone? Who holds your hand when you're alone? Hold on, hold on, hold on, yeah. Well, now some people believe in Jesus, and I guess that works real good. Some people believe in God like they believe in knocking on wood. Religion is a picture window. Life is not a pretty picture. Rattles when the wind blows. Never knew it hit her. Who holds your hand when you're alone? Who holds your hand when you're alone? Yeah. Who holds your hand when you're alone? Who holds your hand when you're alone? Yeah, 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 yeah. hand when you're alone? Who holds your hand when you're alone?
Patty Larkin. That was fabulous. What's Rand McNally again? What was that thing?
What?
What is Rand McNally? Okay,
I know.
well,
Seriously, right?
exactly. Yesterday's news. We're talking to Patty Larkin.
So, Patty, you mentioned that you came here when your sister had the baby, went to Berkeley College of Music for a while. Yeah. How did this all start for you? How did you break into the business?
Well, I had been a songwriter since, junior high school, I guess, but I never thought I would be able to do it as a job. I feel very lucky that I think it's worked out pretty well for me. But,
it's worked out very well for you.
All things considered. But I slowly started doing coffee houses in college, and then when I moved to Oregon for the last couple of years, I was in like a jug band and a blues thing, and then I was writing my, big fan of Joni Mitchell, writing along those lines too, So it was so much music that was happening. Met Richie Havens and just kind of got inspired by a lot of people. And I think the folk revival or the songwriter revival, if I can speak of it that way, it's like in the early 90s was really a huge impetus for me in terms of inspiration and writing.
Who in the 90s?
Well, gosh, just about everybody. But I mean, people like Jonathan Brooke and Jennifer Kimball, the whole Boston scene, Ellis Paul, Bill Morrissey, Suzanne Vega. I opened for her in her first concert here, big concert. And, Maria Muldaur was a huge, influence in terms of the jug band music, but that was before that. So there was a lot going on, a lot of great writing going on. Nancy Griffith, Guy Clark, that whole scene.
Do you not want to talk? I mean, you mentioned this ball. You were in really bad shape last year, weren't you?
It was an unforeseen twist of fate. Something you never want to have happen. I was with my family on vacation last June, and I got up in the night in a strange place, and I fell face down and injured my spinal cord. So I was paralyzed from the neck down.
Oh.
And 4 months later, my surgeon who did the surgery the next day said he actually thought I was going to be a quadriplegic for the rest of my life. Wow. So I'm super, super lucky, super blessed. I have friends here today and friends in the community, in the greater community, and people praying for me that really came through.
So what happened? I'm sorry. Obviously, you're playing the guitar, your fingers are nimble, you're sitting there looking perfectly healthy. So how'd you go from being almost a quadriplegic to what looks like a pretty dramatic recovery? Yeah.
Normal person?
Yeah.
A lot of work, a lot of wonderful, I said to my daughter that week after this happened, she came to me in the hospital, and I said, I'm going to come back 100%. I'm almost there. And, but also, the mixed blessing is I'm meeting incredible people here.
Yeah.
People I never would have met that are such hard workers. They're really invested in your care and really want you to succeed. And I worked hard with
tons
them.
of rehab, I imagine.
Yeah, in terms of rehab. Yeah.
Okay.
I never know if these stories are true or sweet. I read somewhere, I think, that when you came out of surgery, they were playing Angels Running. Is that true, or is that? Is that you or Cher singing Angels Running?
Yeah, that's right. It was the song of mine that Cher covered, and I love her so much.
Pretty great cover
for that.
too, by the way. I should
Yeah,
say.
it is really great. No, the anesthesiologist, he's from Austin. I'm sorry. He said, "Oh, you're a musician. I love music. This is going to be great." I'm like, "Fantastic," because I play guitar too. Is it going to work? Yeah. So anyway, he comes rushing out after the surgery. I'm waking up and groggy, and I said to him, "Did it work?" I did like Katharine Hepburn.
Jared, you listening? Wherever he is, go ahead.
Sorry, Jared. But he was like, that was fantastic. You weren't waking up. So we played Angels Running. You opened your eyes and smiled. It was great. I said, did it work? Because it was so great. I said, did it work? He goes, yes, it worked. So, it was pretty cool, though.
So let me say one more time before Patty's kind enough to play a second time. Lexington tomorrow night. That's April 29th. Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library, Maxwell Auditorium, for this great cause that Marjorie was talking to Patty about, these gardens. And by the way, I think I told you, a good friend of ours from Silent Spring, Rachel Sarvey, who is married to Katie Curtis, who is a great musician as well, is going to be there tomorrow night, and we hope a lot of other people are too.
And Chris Matthews is opening the show, and she's fantastic.
Oh, that's
she's a
fabulous.
beautiful voice and great performer.
You doing one more thing?
Yes.
What are you playing?
Coming Up for Air. One of my favorites, anyway.
I love it. Here she is, Patty Larkin.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. We are surrounded by so much water that we might as well get a boat. We could swim like Neptune's daughter to the other side of the moats. Coming up for air. Rising to a very new somewhere. Coming up for air. Last breath around. We are sleeping in a canyon where the walls rise up to the sky. We could reach the rim by standing and begin to breathe a sigh. Coming up for air. Rising to a very new somewhere. Coming up for air. On the last breath around. We are swaying like a willow that is weeping over the view. We could wave goodbye and fly into the hills and into the blue. Coming up for air. Rising to a very new somewhere. Coming up for air. On the last breath around. On the last breath around. on the last breath
Was that beautiful?
You've been listening
Patty,
to the
thank
music
you so
of
much.
Patty Larkin.
So great.
He's got a show tomorrow night at the
Wow.
Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Libraries, Maxwell Auditorium, and more shows all throughout the summer, including a concert at the Museum of Fine Arts right here in Boston. For more information on tickets and dates, go to pattylarkin.com. And thank you so much, Patty, for coming in today
It's great
to
to
the
have
Boston
you.
Public Library and entertaining
She's
us all.
also doing John Davidson, who he loves. Great
Oh,
Dane
gosh.
in Sandwich,
Yeah,
New Hampshire.
Sandwich.
One of the greats
That's right.
ever. John is fabulous.
Yeah, he is great.
Hope to see you again soon, Patty. Thanks so
Jim.
much for your time. Good luck. You're
Okay.
wonderful.
After a quick break, every parent has been there on the sidelines of their kid's soccer or baseball game or basketball game or whatever game. And how should I put this? When another parent lets their enthusiasm get the best of them. One New Jersey town's Little League is imposing new rules to make sure
Cabot Corporation, proud to sponsor GBH and the Boston Speakers Series. Cabot is committed to fostering an inclusive workplace where all employees can contribute. Learn more at cabotcorp.com. And Grogan & Company, fine art and jewelry auctioneers, assisting New England families with the sale of their fine paintings and jewelry since 1987. You can learn more about their spring auction season at their Beacon Hill Gallery or at groganco.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the Boston Public Library. I loved every second of that. That was just so
she was
incredibly beautiful. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. A reminder again, we have a special event, an after-hours event next Tuesday. We've never done this before. It's a taping of Marjorie and me in a conversation with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She'll be here for the whole hour. You can ask her questions too if you're here, plus a live performance by the phenomenal kids from the Boston Arts Academy Spirituals Ensemble. As I mentioned, Marjorie and I heard them for the first time at Milking's funeral. They are brilliant. It's here at the GBH BPL, meaning Boston Public Library studio, next Tuesday at 6. There's beer and wine and finger food. The whole thing's free, open to the public. But because it's after hours, we have to have you RSVP. So if you want to be there, you go to gbhnews.org/BPR, gbhnews.org/BPR. Good job, Jim. That was really excellent. So as important as it might be to show up for your kids' Little League games, there's a limit to how much enthusiasm is, let us say, appropriate. We've all been forced to bear witness to that one mother or dad who's taken it upon him or herself to loudly criticize the referee, or the worst cases, hurling insults at the kids themselves. In this place called Deptford, New Jersey, one Little League is imposing, I love this, a new rule to try and quell obnoxious parents. Spectators who argue with the ump will have to serve as a referee or an ump themselves for 3 games. It came after several umpires quit, citing verbal abuse. I shouldn't laugh as a reason. Here's league president Don Somebody explaining the new rule to the ABC affiliate in New Jersey.
The main purpose is not for them to be able to call a baseball game, for them to see what's going on out here, and it's not that easy. They're not baseball players, they're children. So always keep that in the back of your mind and let them play.
So we want to know at 877-301-8970, which, as you know, is a call number and a text number. Is this punishment severe enough? What do you think of this creative punishment? Much more importantly, what are your own Little League, I don't just mean baseball, but Little League, small L, horror stories? And what do you think it is that sets so many parents off and have them so intrusive in their little kids' lives? 877-301-8970. I have my worst story. Do you have one?
You can tell yours.
Okay, I'm walking through this is 15 years ago with one of my kids who was then, no, longer ago, 20 years ago, because she was in single digits. We're walking through a park in Cambridge near Fresh Pond. And there's a baseball.
Can't believe this happened in Cambridge, by the way.
There's a baseball game with kids who are about 2 feet tall. So I don't know how old, 5 years or something. Honest to God, this is true. It's like imprinted on my brain. A little kid comes up who's like up to my knee. He gets to the plate, just, so the practice swings, and I assume his father stands up and yells, "Johnny, this is your chance to redeem yourself."
Awful.
The kid had struck out the prior time, and this little tiny kid is having to live through the pressure and humiliation of his obnoxious father. Have you ever seen one of those?
Well, nothing that bad, but I've seen lots of parents screaming from the sidelines in a basketball court or at the soccer game or something.
What is wrong with these people?
It humiliates the children, by the way.
Totally, right.
They can't stand it. They want you to sit there and shut up and say nothing. I've heard coaches. The worst for me was the Pop Warner, which we lasted for about 3 weeks, and the little kids football things with these coaches. They think that some of them, I'm sure some of them are great.
They're Bill Belichick.
Yeah, exactly.
I know exactly.
And these little kids are out there like 7 years old, 8 years old. It's August. It's like 90 degrees. The steam is coming out of their heads. We can't have any water until halftime and stuff like that. I thought, what is wrong with you people? They take it so seriously. So I think there's a lot. I love sports. My kids all played sports. I played sports. I thought it was great. But you can get really carried away and humiliate somebody.
Didn't a guy kill somebody in Massachusetts?
That was
15, at a hockey game or something?
Yeah, 20 years ago. Well, more than that, 20 years ago. July 2000.
The guy went to jail.
It was a kid's hockey practice. Right. It wasn't even a game. And he did 6 to 10 years in state prison because he involuntary manslaughter of another hockey dad. There was one that I didn't even know about. This is a basketball game
Where's
up in
this?
Vermont. I think Vermont is more peaceful than us here in Massachusetts. Anyway, a Vermont man died after a brawl at a middle school basketball game. Middle school. These kids are 12 and 13. They got into a fight over the game, and the guy left, and he was dead.
There's one last story that I was not aware of until we were preparing today.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about intrusive. This is not just little kids.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's supposedly a U.S. soccer star. Gio Reyna? Is that how you say his name?
Don't ask me.
His mother starts either tweeting out or doing something on social media trashing the coach of U.S. men's soccer.
Oh, that's right.
Because her
Yeah.
son is not playing enough, so it gives you the heebie-jeebies.
And then there are always the situations where there's someone that's well known whose kid might be on the team. You know what I mean?
Like, what do you mean?
Well, someone that should never be playing the quarterback on the Pop Warner team is somehow playing the quarterback because
he or
dad
she
might
is
be
the kid.
sponsoring the team and buying the uniforms and all that kind of stuff. And the kid knows that they shouldn't be playing the quarterback, and it's just so embarrassing for everybody. But that's what happens because dad's got a lot of money and dad's sponsoring the team.
How about Johnny? This is your chance to redeem yourself.
That's horrible.
Can you imagine? 877.
You should get 6 to 10 at Walpole.
301-8970. Quickly before we get to the calls, this umpire thing is clever, but I don't think it's exactly a great penalty, so they have to umpire a game. 3 games. Is that?
Well, because they have to admit that they did something terrible.
Oh, that's a good point. They stand out. That's a very good point.
They're doing
That's a good
terrible
point.
means they have to be kind of embarrassed in
Well,
front of all the
you're
other
right
players
about
by
that.
putting on
Okay.
the umpire's outfit. Oh, you also see people, the high school kids that are the umpires of these little kids basketball games.
Getting screamed at themselves.
People screaming at them. It's crazy. It's just crazy what goes on. Anyway, 877-301-8970. What do you think? Should these people that scream and yell from the stands at their kids or at the umpire, should they have to get out there and see what it's like to umpire a game and have everybody second guess every move you make? Peter from Framingham, you are first on 96.9. 96.9.
No, we were on 96.9 11 years ago.
I used to be on 96.9.
Okay.
I'm no longer on 96.9.
Oh, my God.
I'm on 89.7 GBH.
God help us.
Yeah. That's a hip-hop station now.
Marjorie Egan from Durfee High School here. Oh, no, that was before, too. Peter in Framingham. This happens to be 89.7 GBH, Peter, in case you were confused. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Jim, Marjorie, I know who you are.
Okay,
good. Thank you.
It's a good start.
I wasn't sure, Peter, myself.
Long time listener, first time caller.
Thank you.
Great.
I have to tell you this. I don't know what it's going to come to, slippery slope, whether it's Corey forms or, just people being checked out ahead of time, whether games are going to be watched remotely by parents. But, coaches have to go through a rigorous training program and there's Corey checks. But what about the parents? What are they bringing to the table? What sort of background check is being done on the parents?
Corey is a criminal records check for those who don't know. I'm sorry, Peter. Go. Yeah, and I know you know.
But I'm bringing it to the absurdity in a way, but it's reality. I can tell you this anecdotally. I coached for 12 years in a local town.
Yeah.
And an individual got so irate that he flipped off the umpire. The umpire paused the game. It was a parent from one of my players. And he turned around, he was ejected, and he mooned the umpire.
He mooned.
Well, wait a second. How long did he moon him for? I think that's relevant. How long was that? That is unbelievable.
About as much time as it takes,
Pull your pants down. Fine. Okay, thank you, Peter.
So hold on.
Yeah, right.
I think that's enough from Peter, but go ahead. What, Marjorie?
I want to know what happened. Was there a penalty after that?
What do you mean, what happened? What did it look like? What do you mean?
No, I was wondering if he was ejected from the game or what happened.
Okay, fine.
Yep.
What about it?
Well, he made the motion and he went halfway down his...
Yeah.
Yeah, we got that.
That's lovely.
We got that part, okay.
Okay.
But we had to explain it to the children afterwards, and that was totally humiliating.
What'd you have to explain? It was his ass. What did you have to explain? They didn't know that?
I don't think you're supposed to say
Peter,
that on the radio.
I'm sorry, his behind. Peter, thank you for the call. Here's a good one you'll appreciate, Marjorie. The whole notion is if you trash the umpires in this Jersey place, you live in the shoes of the umpire. Here's what Paul from Worcester says. Is there a way that Jim can experience what it's like for Marjorie to be his co-host? That's a good one.
That's a good one, Paul. That's a good one.
It's not necessary to applaud, but thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Here's Donna watching on YouTube. Heard one parent yell to his kid, "You're 6 years old. Act like it."
Oh my God.
Wait.
Does that mean act like a little boy or act like a grown-up?
Act like a 6-year-old.
What means like grow up kind of thing?
I guess. It's cruel,
That's
whatever
nice.
it is.
Mike in a car, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about misbehaving parents at kids' whatevers. Hello, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
I think we're good.
I just want to say first, I'm glad I finally found you down there at 897. I've been looking for 11 years, Marjorie.
That's right. That's right. We used to be at 96.9 FM Talk. And then, and you know what the worst part of it is, Mike? They flip the station
to hip-hop.
To hip-hop, and Mom loses her job. And what do my kids do the next day? They listen to 96.9 hip-hop. I said, turn that station off. Just turn it off. But anyway, why'd you call?
Well, so obviously this is a fun topic for everybody, and I don't have any real horror stories. I saw some. My kids played every sport. They're all older now. I coached. I like to think I was a pretty good parent, pretty good coach. But one time when one of my kids was playing Young Little League, they were always short of umpires, and I don't remember how old they were, like 8 or 9 years old. And I had to do it one game, and I hated it. It was harder than I thought. And it was awful. And then they would need people, and I would literally hide. I'd be hiding behind the concession. Like,
that's
it's just a thankless job, I'll tell you. Because they can't, first of all, like someone said, they're just kids that can't play. So it's like you can, it's very hard to call balls and strikes. But, I just, the one time I did it, I couldn't stand it, but, it was hard. I was terrible, too, and I do it. I did an awful job.
Mike, we've missed you for the last 11 years. We're glad you finally found us. Thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thanks so much.
I momentarily couldn't get the text. Jamie fixed it for me.
What was it?
Wakefield, a mother beat up a 12-year-old kid at the baseball
When was
field.
this?
I don't know.
When was this?
I don't. Well, they didn't give me the names and dates, but that's what they claimed to have witnessed.
That's
so there
nice.
you go.
877-301-897. I don't know what the 3 minutes one. I give them the number.
I'm here at the library. Worst parenting spectators was seeing our hometown parents and young soccer kids shouting, build that wall at the opposing soccer team, which is primarily made up of Latino kids.
No, that is not true.
Is that person here in the audience?
Are you
serious?
serious?
My God.
Where is that? Do you feel bad? You okay? No, that's not very precise, but
Spectator
thank
parents
you.
teach
That
kids
is
how to be
brutal.
respectful or disrespectful participants in life. What do? We had our son, the goalie, hand out donuts to the opposing team, and we
Good
talked
for
to the
your
middle
kid.
school
That's
about
great.
behavioral
Oh my
sportsmanship.
God.
Very good. That was great. I'm glad we got a chance to read that. Are we
We
done?
have time for a quick Bob from
Okay,
Worcester.
we have a quick Bob from
Dorchester,
Worcester.
sorry.
Hi, Bob from Dorchester.
You have like 30 seconds, Bob.
Sorry.
All right. Hi, Jim. The reason I'm calling is I have a different story. I was a coach for my son in the Little League, and, the kids have slumps like everyone else.
Yeah.
And I noticed he was always looking at me after we would swing in the dugout.
Yeah.
So I thought for him, I'd go behind the dugout when he was up at bat. Years later, we're having a conversation. He says, Dad, remember when you thought I was so bad at Little League, you couldn't even bear to watch me?
Oh, no,
That is
Bob.
like horrible.
Oh, Bob. Oh, God.
What's his shrink say about it now, Bob?
Cried my eyes out. And speaking of shrinks, we did have a father yelling at his kid so bad he was banned from coming to the field.
Good. Bob, thanks. We got to go. Thank you.
That is one of the worst things, though, Bob. I empathize when you're watching your kids up at bat. It's really hard if they have a strikeout or whatever. But anyway, we're done.
Can I just say, since Patty Larkin is still here, we're flooded with people. I learned about Patty Larkin when I was 15 years old in 96, saw her perform at Beardsley Zoo in Connecticut. There are mountains of these, Patty, so you got a lot of fans.
Thank you very much, Patty Larkin, for being here today. Thanks everybody else who came
Thank
down
you
to the
all for
Boston
coming.
Public
We appreciate
Library.
it.
Really appreciate it. Tune in on Monday for a new party leaders panel. We're going to be joined by the Mass GOP's chair, Amy Carnevale, and Mass Dems chair, Steve Kerrigan, for their first joint interview.
that's great.
Since taking leadership of their parties. That should
Great.
be fun. Charlie Sennett will join us as well, the Reverend Zion Monroe and Emmett G. Price III, and some local community development leaders on what they're doing to keep Boston culture-rich and affordable for all. That's a good idea. Then on Tuesday, more Be Treated to music from Stephen Lynch, co-founder and former lead singer of Bare Naked Ladies here at the BPL. Oh, I thought we were talking about the congressman and suddenly got a new avocation there. No, it's Bare Naked Ladies. Wow, that's impressive. Our crew, we'd like to thank them. Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John the Claw Parker, Jim's assistant.
That's not funny.
That's a joke.
Okay, good.
Jim, our
really
executive
not
producer, is Jane Bologna. He is not Jim's assistant.
Okay, thank you.
Special
It's too
thanks to
late.
the team here at the library, Sai Patel, Evelyn Brito, and Brad Lewis. We got a special
Again,
event.
Tuesday we're back at the library for our normal show, 11 to 2. We're back again Tuesday night, May 2nd at 6 o'clock, our first ever BPR After Hours event. Congresswoman Presley will be with us for the whole hour, and we've said this fabulous kids choir. They're not kids, they're teenagers.
They're great.
Boston Arts Academy Spirituals Ensemble at 6 o'clock next Tuesday. Beer, wine, finger food, everything is free, open to the public. However, if you don't register in advance, you can't come. Takes 2 minutes. Go to gbhnews.org/BPR, gbhnews.org/BPR.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in.
Thanks
Hope
for
you have
being
a
here.
great weekend and hope you can tune in on
Thank
Monday.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Charles McCare is conducting the Scottish Chamber Orchestra with the Symphony in D by Dvorak.
Music on WCRB is here thanks to you. And Loud and Live, presenting Gypsy Kings at the Bach Center Wang Theater Wednesday, May 3rd, for a night of dancing and music spanning their